Then I watched him leap up and transform into a true dragon hundreds of meters long. No flood dragon, but the genuine article. Body all azure, vast fearsome horns, white flowing mane streaming off his huge head, 2 dragon whiskers trailing from his mouth, 4 legs each ending in 5 savage claws. He roamed the water lawless and unbound, and loosed an enormous roar, and every creature on the peak flattened itself shuddering. My own body went weak, the instinctive surrender of a lesser thing before the irresistible, and Mori and the 3 commoners had already dropped prostrate, though Windsor and Hwawa stood mostly unaffected, Hwawa even flitting about studying the dragon with open curiosity. I checked his panel and snapped a few photos with my system panel while I was at it, purely to light a fire under myself, because someday I'd command grandeur to put this in the shade. Azure Sea Dragon King, Legendary Hero, Level 24, Strength 473, Agility 387, Defense 401, Skills unreadable past the level gap. So the Azure Sea Dragon King was a legendary hero and not a sea beast at all. The power staggered me, but what gripped me more was his identity. Because a legendary hero belonged to some lord's forces, and all this around him was a territory's army. A fearsomely strong territory at that. The guards had called him Third Prince, which made him the lord's own descendant. I found myself wondering where the sea races even built their territories, whether on islands or somewhere down in the sea, and it dawned on me how vast this world truly was. The endless sea brimming with secrets. The world wasn't the bleak thing I saw every day, nothing but survival and water to the horizon. Out in the places I couldn't reach there had to be whole civilized worlds, and I could only touch any of it once I grew strong, since right now I was an infant. I burned with longing for the future, certain I'd one day stand against existences like this, and certain I could do it. The first step toward that was raising my own territory. Fighting spirit flooded me. Up in the air, the Azure Sea Dragon King looked thoroughly satisfied with the reverence of every beast below, and he spoke human words from his dragon mouth, deep and clear. Just one. Reward. Then he shifted back to human form, gathered his dragon girls close, and withdrew into the palace. I was still puzzling over the word when sea creatures hauled great boxes out from the first floor and began flinging the contents across the peak. A flat-out prodigal, scattering his fortune like a man tossing coins in the street, a windfall dropping out of the sky. Good thing he wasn't my kid, because if he were, I'd have beaten him senseless, and I left whichever lord owned him to deal with that headache himself. My job was to grab what I could before the other beasts, already going feral over the loot, took it all. I sent Little Blue in to fight for the spoils and set Windsor and Hwawa to snatching items with their control skills. Soon the Azure Sea Dragon King and his host had moved off into the distance, leaving only the increasingly rabid sea beasts, who'd already turned on each other over the hall. I took one look at that and chose to leave, because the place had grown lethal and my dive time was nearly spent. I started the boat and watched the chaotic peak shrink and vanish from sight, and gradually I heard rain pattering into the sea and knew I was about to surface. When we broke the surface, I looked at the gloomy sky and the endless gray water and replayed the whole scene, and if not for the gains sitting in my space, I might have taken it all for a hallucination. I composed myself and told Mori to take the 4 of them fishing, handing out the rods, then told Windsor to head to the residence with Hwawa and recharge the boat. She nodded, said she understood, and carried Hwawa off toward the residence. Back in the room, before any spending, I checked exactly what I'd managed to snatch. 3 items in all. The first was a pet's quality on use, though the higher the level the lower the success rate. That one was a real gift, purple quality and a rare tool for lifting aptitude, which in this world basically dictates a creature's strength and growth ceiling. I weighed who to use it on. On Little Blue it would push him to purple with near certain success, while on Hwawa it risked failure but, if it took, would hand me a second legendary level fighter. I decided on Hwawa since purple enhancement tools don't come cheap, and I'd upgrade Little Blue later when another surfaced. The second item was a crisis warning device manufacturing blueprint, which detected hostile creatures within 300 and sounded an alarm, needing 30 iron, 30 copper, 20 broken circuit board, and 10 glass to build. A fair list, and I had none of the broken circuit board, though a few panes of glass which jogged my memory that I still hadn't used the window blueprint. So I took out the window blueprint and built it, and a glass pane appeared in the wooden wall, rain drumming against it. The warning device looked genuinely useful, so I meant to build it fast. I checked the trade channel, found neither component listed, and posted 2 purchase requests, 100 white stone for 10 glass and 200 for 20 broken circuit board, then dropped a line in the chat asking whether anyone had glass or circuit boards to trade. After that I stopped watching it. The last item was a small glass tube of cyan liquid, Azure Sea Dragon Blood, Blue, which granted the Azure Sea Dragon Clan bloodline on use, with the condition that every base attribute reach above 51st. There really was such a thing. If I drank it, I wouldn't become Dragon Clan, only carry their bloodline. But still, I put it away since I couldn't touch it yet and would need to hit level 6 or 7 before I met the requirement. Then I opened technology, found ship diving technology in its weakened form, and chose to upgrade. 3,000 whitestone took it to level 2, doubling my daily dive to 2 hours. After that I opened multi-ore linkage power propulsion technology, and spent 1,000 to push it to level 2 as well. because after seeing the Azure Sea Dragon King, my hunger for a territory had only sharpened, and I wanted to reach that island faster. If my energy supply could have kept up, I'd have poured more levels into the propulsion outright, but for now the others weren't worth upgrading, since they'd offer me little at the moment. Then I bought the materials to upgrade the boat itself: 500 wood, 800 iron nails, 50 copper, and chose upgrade. The boat hit level 5, 30 meters by 9. Its facilities now a core cabin, a large living area, 2 small living areas, a warehouse, a toilet, and the fishing corridor, running on multi-oar linkage propulsion. Its technology stacked up across drainage at level 2, thermal energy at 1, automation at 1, propulsion at 2, and diving weakened at 2, with diving as its special ability. The upgrade added a large living area and a small living area, stretched the boat 10 meters longer at the same width, and renamed the cabin to Core Cabin, which I guess was groundwork for bigger changes to the ship down the line. I stepped out of the core cabin, and Mori and the 4 commoners all started to rise and salute, but I waved them off and told them to keep fishing, then assigned Mori to a small living area for the night, and the 3 commoners to the large one, which they all acknowledged. I glanced at the oars and counted 4 extra, clearly the result of pushing the propulsion to level 2. Then I went to the small living area where Windsor and Hwawa were, and the second I opened the door, a wave of heat rolled over me, along with the sight of Windsor's rain-soaked dress clinging to every line of her, a sight I won't risk describing in detail. I reined myself in. With the awkward third presence of Mori moving out of the room tonight, I'd finally have room to deepen things with Windsor anyway. I cleared my throat and told them to pause a moment. I interrupted Windsor and Hwawa, and the two stopped. Windsor flushed first, then quickly dried her clothes, while Hwawa flew over happily and hugged my head. I caught Hwawa, took out the pet quality enhancement card, and used it on her. The card dissolved into purple light and sank into her body, her eyes snapping shut as her aura churned. Slowly she grew until she stood around 40 centimeters, double her old size, a flame pattern blooming on her fair little forehead that lent her small tender face a touch of noble bearing. I was overjoyed, since it had plainly worked, and I now had a second legendary level fighter at my side. When she opened her eyes, she looked at me happily and pressed her face to my cheek, nuzzling, more affectionate than ever. Then I took out 2 green Lingyan gold fruit and had Windsor and Hwawa each eat 1. I checked Hwawa's panel afterward, her tag now reading Fire Elemental Spirit. Gold, level 6, Strength 43, Agility 42, Defense 40, with Fireball, Blazing Body, Fire Binding, and Fire Shield. Her stats had climbed 3 points, 2 into Strength and 1 into Agility, and the quality jump had handed her the extra Fire Shield skill while flipping her tag from purple to gold. The raw numbers barely moved, but her growth ceiling now towered over the purple version. I turned to Windsor and asked how many attributes she gained, and she said happily that her Agility rose 2, and her defense rose 2, the green Ling Yuan gold fruit capping at 4. I nodded, still a little surprised by the result. I said goodbye to Windsor and the others, called Little Blue over, and fed him a green Ling Yuan gold fruit, which gave him 3 points, all into strength. His panel read Deep Sea Giant Whale, Blue, level 6, Strength 35, Agility 30, Defense 30, with Impact and Bite. He'd been hunting on his own these past 2 days and climbed to level 6 off it. I patted his head and sent him back to the hunt, then went fishing myself. The afternoon flew, and though the drop rate ran higher now, nothing remarkable surfaced. The one decent gain was a silk pajamas blueprint, permanent use, 5 silk to craft. A good thing to keep, both for clothes and for business, since I could buy silk, sew pajamas, and resell them on the trade channel at a margin. After dinner, I built wooden beds, tables, and chairs and set them out across the 3 living quarters, then bought straw and cloth and had a few commoners spread them, so any future summon could simply move in. I'd wanted proper bedding for them too, but a search of the trade channel turned up none, and I couldn't fathom why comfortable bedding surfaced so rarely. Back in the core cabin, Windsor already lay in bed while Hwawa stayed outside recharging, likely her role for a long while. I didn't lie down yet. I took out the warning device blueprint and built it, having gathered the basic materials over the afternoon, and a golden sphere appeared on a meter-wide base, paired with a fist-sized glass ball cradling a small light, the ball being the indicator and the sphere the detector. I called 3 commoners to carry the golden sphere to the bow, then shed my outer clothes, drew back the covers, and lay down. Windsor folded into me at once, rubbing her head against my chest, and I bent and kissed her forehead. Then I checked Wang Mok's trade list for the day, which held nothing special beyond a green cup and a green spoon, both of which I bought for 50 white stone each. Chicken scraps to others, useless junk. So I'd thrown in 5 extra white stone, and the seller traded at once and praised my generosity. I asked him to spread the word that I was very interested in high-quality daily goods, and he agreed gladly. Worthless to everyone else, these were treasures in my hands, since my talent could spin trash into gold. I used the cup first, ran my talent, and got a blueprint. Luxury bedding set. Blue, 50 cotton wool and 15 cloth to build, which sped you into deep sleep and restored your mind better. So it turned out a daily good, and I noticed these comfort items carried quality grades yet added no stats, only making life softer. I put it away to build tomorrow. I ran 100 transformations again and got a recharging bright lamp, blue, 5 broken circuit board, 5 iron, 5 copper, and 2 tungsten filament to build, which soaked up sunlight by day and lit the dark by night. Another daily good. I'd started to notice the talent's output leaned toward the kind of item I fed it, so daily goods bred daily goods, and I wondered whether that was the direction the talent might evolve, whether I'd one day be able to conjure whatever I pleased. The thought thrilled me. Even as a mere comfort item, the lamp pleased me, since I'd been lighting the cabin with candles bought off the trade channel, and now my standard of living crept up a notch. If I improved a little every day, my wooden boat would eventually become a luxury cruise ship, a combat-grade luxury cruise ship at that. I searched the trade channel and managed only 2 broken circuit boards, so I posted requests, 30 white stone for 3 boards and 40 for 2 tungsten filament, shouted in the chat, and let it go. For the talent's final use of the night, I took out a gold stone, and my eyes flickered with doubt over whether to gamble it. This was 10,000 white stone, and if it turned into something like a purple crystal, I'd weep. After weighing it, I gambled anyway, since I wasn't desperate for cash, and even spending this gold stone left me around 6,000 white stone after the day's upgrades. I used 100 transformations, a golden light flashed, and a tree appeared in my hand, 50 centimeters tall, its branches hung with white stone and a few purple stone. A money tree, a special item that grows an undetermined amount of currency every day. I burst out laughing, because I'd gambled and won. I plucked everything off the branches and counted over 500 white stone, which meant that from now on, doing nothing at all, I'd earn 500 a day, and with luck maybe gold stone. I set the money tree on the floor. Then I pulled Windsor close and kissed her hard, since she'd been pressing against my chest the whole time I worked the talent and stirred my blood. She startled and resisted faintly before answering with soft hums and the occasional nasal sound. She'd seen the way I'd looked at the dragon girls earlier and still felt some of it, which was why she'd spent the day teasing me. A kiss was soon far too little, and I wanted further, climbing a peak to take in the wonderful view, while Windsor let out a muffled groan, her body going slack. Just as I made to press on, she pushed me with her hand, and I felt it and let her go. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes shimmered, and a strip of fair skin showed at her waist from the recent skirmish. Breathing lightly, feeling my heated gaze, she lowered her head and said she wasn't ready yet, half afraid to meet my eyes. I'd lost some control myself a moment ago, but I was clearer now, and I told her it was all right. I'd been reckless. She should rest. I was a little let down, but comforted her anyway. I understood our intimacy better than she did, since I had a progress bar to read, and I wasn't in any rush. After a full day together, her affinity toward me had reached 87, and I figured it would hit 90 by tomorrow night. She caught the trace of disappointment in my eyes and apologized with some guilt, then lifted her head and kissed my lips. I told her it really was fine and to hurry and rest, then added that she didn't need to call me Lord anymore. My name was Ha Shin, and she could just use it. She started to protest with a startled little sound, but seeing my eyes widen slightly, she nodded instead. I told her to try saying it a few times to get used to it, and she shut her eyes and whispered Ha Shin so faintly it was nearly inaudible. Louder, I said. She managed a touch more volume, then a few more times until it came easier, her eyes finally opening to look at me, and with that our relationship stepped a notch closer. I held her, idly toying, and she didn't refuse, though her breathing ran heavy, and so the two of us talked ourselves slowly to sleep. In a daze, I felt something poking my face, and I opened my eyes to find Hua prodding my cheek with her little staff. The instant she saw me wake, she pointed frantically at the floor, and I looked down and snapped, fully alert, because the room was awash with water. I scrambled up and went outside, where the rain had grown far heavier than during the day, the drops huge and dense, the distance looking like someone tipping a bucket from the sky. Worse, it kept building, and a sheet of water already lay across the whole boat. Windsor came to my side, and I told her to hurry and wake Mori and the others while I opened the technology panel, found drainage, and spent 2,000 white stone upgrading it to level 3. Even so, the drain couldn't match the rate of accumulation, though it cut it sharply, and I didn't push the upgrade further since the day was nearly over and I'd bail the rest by hand. Mori and the 4 others arrived then, and I sent them to the fishing corridor to bail fast, handing out 4 basins which they took with a quick acknowledgement before turning to the work. It was nearly dawn already, and I had no idea how much longer the rain would fall. If a 6th day kept up like this, few people would survive. I opened the world channel and found it thick with the dunes shouting that they were finished, that only standing guards had kept their ships from sinking outright, that Shiano meant to wipe them all out in one sweep, just a scatter of desperate lines since everyone was too busy saving their boats to type much. Judging the current intensity, I decided no further upgrade was needed, and Mori plus the 4 would do, so I set Hua back to charging, started the boat moving, wrapped an arm around Windsor's soft waist, and steered her back to the room. I had her use light elements to evaporate the damp inside. Then the two of us climbed back into bed to sleep. Just then, Wang Mok and Li Chung both messaged at once, Wang Mok crying for help, Li Chung crying urgent help. I ignored Li Chung and answered Wang Mok first, asking what was wrong. Wang Mok begged me to lend him some money he'd repay later, saying that without upgrading his drainage now he was finished. The message frantic enough that I believed it. I thought a moment and sent him 1,000 white stone. He'd been working for me these past 2 days, so I was willing to save him, especially since it was only a loan. I wasn't worried about repayment either, since cooperating with me kept him earning, and stiffing me on this would end his business with me for good. And unless he was a fool, he'd see that. Beyond all that, I had to save him. Because if I left him to die and he posted a dying message that I'd watched him drown, my reputation would be ruined and no one would genuinely work for me again. By heart and by logic both. I couldn't let Wang Mok fend for himself. Once Wang Mok had the white stone, he was overjoyed and rushed to upgrade his drainage, but the surprising 5 commoners already at his side bailing water. He thanked me over and over, truly grateful now, since this was a life-saving favor, and he marveled privately at his own luck in ever connecting with me. I told him to just survive first, then asked Li Chung what his situation was, since with only a single trade between us I had no intention of simply lending him stone. Li Chung saw my reply and immediately sent 2 pictures, a territory core and a ship core, offering both for 2,000 white stone. I frowned, since I wasn't sure of their exact worth yet, only that they were clearly precious, and well past 1,000. A territory core could found a territory outright, and while I wasn't certain what the ship core did, I guessed it served some future upgrade to the boat. I told Li Chung the things looked pretty useless to me right now and asked whether he had anything else good, though I wanted them, because I didn't want to leap at the offer and meant to probe whether he was holding back better goods. He wasn't, of course, or he'd never have surfaced these 2, and he panicked at the thought I might pass, insisting these were the most valuable things he owned, and begging me to save him, swearing he'd sell me anything good he found in the future, even if he didn't need it himself. I read him plainly and understood he really had nothing left, and as for that last promise, I took it as noise, since no one actually sells off their good finds. So I told him fine, let's trade, but if he turned up anything good later, he should sell to me first, and the price wouldn't disappoint him. My message dressed up to look reluctant. I tucked the 2 cores away, my lips curving into a smile, never having expected such an unlooked-for gain. Li Chung had no idea what I was actually thinking, and he thanked me like I'd done him a favor. In his head, those 2 cores were dead weight, the kind of junk nobody else would touch right now, and anyone else trading with him would never have handed over 2,000 white stone for a territory core and a ship core both. He took my money and upgraded his wooden boat on the spot to level 3, and he already had a commoner of his own crewing for him. That alone told me he was doing better than most of the players still alive out here. And better than most, sure. Just not better than me. I was busy holding Windsor in my arms with the whole universe cupped in my palms, drifting right back to sleep. When I opened my eyes the second time, the bed beside me was empty, so I got up, pulled on my clothes, and went outside. The rain had thinned to almost nothing. A soft drizzle like the first day all over again. 6th day, which meant the weekend survival point rewards landed today. So I checked the leaderboard before anything else, and my name sat at the top with 1,320 points. Baek Seol held 2nd with 671, Danton 3rd at 670, Lee Kyo 4th, Yi Baekpung 5th, Agawa Hina 6th, James 7th. My total was nearly double the runner-up, so first place reward was already in the bag. I walked out to the fishing corridor the way I did every morning, and a handful of commoners were already settled on the deck with their rods. I told Mori to put breakfast together, then dropped onto the stool next to Windsor, took out the resource fishing rod, and started working it. Hua came peeling out of Windsor's arms the moment she spotted me, fluttered over and tucked herself against my chest. She'd burned through Blazing Body all day yesterday and had no purple crystal this morning, so she was running on empty, asleep against me again within a minute. The first thing I hauled up was a cast iron pot design. White quality, 2 iron block to build. Another iron pot blueprint I already had. After that came 2 sacks of salt, a good 8 pounds, enough to season meals for a long stretch. The last pull gave me a commoner summon card, white quality, which I burned right away. What stepped out was a plain middle-aged woman, tagged Sia, common quality, level 1. A farmer whose whole talent was managing farmland well. A profession at least, even if it was a farmer with no soil to work yet. She came over and bowed, greeting me as her lord, and I gave her my stool and rod and let her take over while I carried Hua back toward the house. That made 5 commoners on rods now, every line occupied, and it finally left me free. When a 6th showed up, I could pull Windsor off duty too, though not anytime soon, because her rod was level 12, and if someone weaker hooked a serious sea beast, none of them could handle it. I'd have to grind them all up properly, especially Mori, because once she matured, she could take Windsor's place. Back inside, I went to work on my own projects, putting together the luxury bedding set and the recharging bright lamp first. The bedding really was extravagant, far thicker than what I'd been sleeping under. The cloth threaded with interlocking gold and blue patterns that screamed money. It also came absurdly oversized, 4 pillows and 2 quilts. A sheet built for a bed twice mine, so I had to build a second wooden bed and shove the 2 together just to spread it flat. And my old set I carried to the small room and gave to Mori. The cooking station had moved into the large room by now, so once she finished a dish she could bring it straight to the core cabin where I worked. Everyone ate, then went back to their rods, and by then the rain had finally stopped for good. I went back out and sat beside Windsor, where the dark clouds were already breaking apart overhead. A single shaft of sunlight punched through, and then the rest of the sky seemed to take revenge for the days it had been smothered. Light flooding in so fast the clouds simply dissolved. In a moment there was nothing left but a vast cloudless blue, the sea stretching out endless and bright, a few seabirds wheeling far off. We all just stood there soaking it in, and the gloom that had sat on my chest for days went off with the clouds. I opened the World Channel and, sure enough, everyone was losing their minds with relief. Players howling that they'd survived, that the sun had never felt this warm, that they'd feast tonight, half of them swearing they'd never look at seafood again, and the joy came off the screen in waves. Reading it, I figured I should celebrate too, and obviously not with seafood, because out here seafood barely counted as a treat anymore, and everyone was sick to death of it. So I decided on a proper vegetable spread instead, since my warehouse still held a decent stock. And right then Shianmo fired off 3 announcements back to back. The first declared this week's rain disaster officially over and congratulated the survivors, promising graded rewards by points. The second said the top 10 on the survival points leaderboard would receive extra rewards on top. The third, almost cheerful, told everyone the personal shop was running special price drinks for the day. So enjoy. Then her voice came again, this time aimed at me alone. And because I'd taken first in points for the week, Chiano said I could pick 1 item from 3 as a special reward on top of the base package. 3 images bloomed in the air and I picked them apart with Spirit Eye. The first was a professional commoner summon card, purple, which would hand me a commoner with a guaranteed profession. The second was Nethersea Demon Dragon Blood, purple. That would grant me the bloodline of the Nethersea Demon Dragon clan. The third was a territory return scroll, purple, that snapped you straight back to your own territory, and all 3 were purple, and I wanted every last one of them. A territory lives and dies on its commoners, the professional ones most of all, since they're the foundation everything else gets built on, and land a purple blacksmith and your territory can forge purple gear. The demon dragon blood was nothing to dismiss either, since drinking it gave you a dragon clan bloodline, and dragons are monstrously durable, which would do wonders for the simple goal of staying alive. And the return scroll had its own uses too. Far from home, you blink back instantly and save hours of travel, and caught in something deadly on an expedition, you trigger it and tear free. 1 more life bought. I chose the demon dragon blood, and my reasoning was simple, because in this world the only thing that truly matters is your own strength being enough. Personal power is the root of the tree and the territory's might is the crown, and only deep roots let the crown spread tall. Beyond that, I still had a portion of Azure Sea Dragon blood tucked away, and I was itching to find out what happened if I combined the 2. I took out the demon dragon blood, another little glass vial, the blood inside a deep purple. Spirit Eye told me consuming it granted the bloodline of the demon dragon race, gated the same as the Azure Dragon blood. Every basic attribute above 50 before I could drink it. So I pulled out the Azure Sea Dragon blood, uncorked it, and tipped the purple demon dragon blood in to see what they'd do, and they did nothing. The cyan and the purple sat there in the glass cleanly divided, a wall between them that wasn't there, refusing to touch, and I stared at the 2 colors, genuinely confused. Windsor leaned in and offered that maybe it came down to the quality, the 2 bloods just sitting at different tiers. She'd meant to call me Ha Shin last night, but said my full name felt too stiff, so she'd settled on A Shin instead, and I had no objection at all. The whole point was getting closer, and that little nickname was a step past plain courtesy, so her guess sounded right to me, and I separated the 2 bloods and put them away. Once I got my hands on something that could raise quality, I'd bump up the Azure Dragon blood first, then try the fusion again, because I had a strong feeling that mixing those 2 would hand me a surprise. I opened the basic survival point gift package next, the staple supplies handed out by points, where everyone got 1, just bigger or smaller. Inside was 200 pounds of flour, 200 of vegetables, 100 of meat, 50 of fruit, 50 liters of drinking water, and a spread of oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar. Enough to feed my 7 people for a solid half month, and I had it hauled into the warehouse. Then a flat wave of boredom hit me, every rod in use and nothing left to do. So I opened the channels to watch other people talk, and the regional channels still showed over 5,000 names. Only 5 days in and half the players were already dead, though the dying would slow now. Whoever was still breathing had real strength, and the cruelest stretch, the opening, was behind us. The chatter turned to the shop, and someone bragged about a bottle of wine while someone else gasped that wine cost 10 white stone, and that reminded me Chianmo had mentioned special drinks. I opened the personal shop and found juice and a whole spread of alcohol. Juice ran 2 white stone a bottle, maybe a pound each, beer 50 a barrel for 50 pounds, red wine 10 a bottle, white wine 20, the wines a pound apiece. I decided to stock up because the special pricing was 1 day only, and I had no idea if it would return next weekend. Money I had, and I could hunt the sea for more every single day. The money tree paid out on its own, but a missed item was simply gone. So I bought 200 bottles of juice, 10 barrels of beer, 50 bottles of red wine, and 10 of white, 1600 whitestone total. When I checked my assets, I was down to a little over 300, and yesterday I'd sat on 21,000, so money really does evaporate. Not a problem though, since 2 hours of hunting a day and I'd never be short. I kept some juice on hand and sent the rest to the warehouse, then grabbed a wooden barrel, used freezing spell on some seawater to make ice, and chilled the juice, and Mori came over right then and handed me a blueprint she'd fished up. I took it, told her to keep going, and looked it over. A barbecue grill design, the flavor text promising that a beautiful night without good barbecue was a flawed night. 10 iron block to build. I built it on the spot, since tonight would be grilled meat and beer. I pulled pork, beef, and lamb from the warehouse, cleaned and marinated them, then opened construction and forged a batch of iron skewers. Only afterward did it hit me that I had no charcoal, and the trade channel had nobody selling any, and I sat there stuck for a second before it clicked. This was another world, so why did I need charcoal when I had a fire fairy, and Hwawa could handle the heat herself? And I started threading skewers. By late morning I'd finished, so I carried the wooden table out to the bow, then called Hwawa over and walked her through how to grill. I took the first bite and it was fragrant, but something was missing: cumin and chili powder. I jumped onto the trade channel half expecting nothing and found someone actually selling exactly that, and a dusting of cumin and chili, another bite, and it was incredible. I called Windsor and Mori over and we settled in to eat. Ice juice in hand, the sea spread out in front of us, skewers coming off the grill. This was what living felt like, because the last several days had only been surviving. Thinking back to that first day with one wooden plank under me, and looking at the ship I had now, a swell of accomplishment ran through me. The kind that can't be enjoyed alone, that has to be shared. So I snapped a photo of the whole scene and dropped it into the world channel, and the truly petty part was that I timed the shot so Windsor was kissing my cheek as I took it. The instant the photo posted, the channel detonated, with players cursing my name and calling me a legend in the same breath, envying my soft little life, noting that the #1 player supplies had to be enormous, lamenting that no top-tier beauty was theirs. And then, right on cue, Hagawa Hina came hunting for trouble. He fired off a line about how a man who only knew how to enjoy himself would never go far, and the Heat Kingdom players sworn to back him up, crowing about their unstoppable Hagawa Hina and his mighty samurai spirit. The Joe Kingdom crowd piled in just as fast to shred him, one of them dryly pointing out that their oh-so-powerful champion ranked 6th and couldn't even be bothered to fight for the top 5. And the two nations had old grudges, so any spark set them off. Hagawa Hina cut through it with a threat thrown straight at me, telling me survival points didn't mean everything and to pray I never crossed his path or I was dead for certain. I was thoroughly done with him since he'd been yapping at me since the very beginning. I asked him why he was always barking my way instead of just living his own little life, whether he was that desperate for my attention. Then I told him flat out that the moment I caught up with him I'd peel the dog skin right off him, because I genuinely wanted to deal with him now. He was that grating. The channel ate it up, mourning little son, cheering for him to run into me fast, joking that he'd turned a corner looking for love and found me waiting to slaughter him instead. This clown had soured my whole afternoon, so I pulled Windsor in and kissed her a few times until my mood evened back out. After lunch I started diving again, today's hunt underway, and same as yesterday, Windsor oversaw and I did the killing. No surprises, just a steady trickle of basic materials. Then I ran into a level 12 sea beast, a sea star, green quality, with blink armor and splash, and it wasn't strong, and Windsor wrapped it up fast and clean. It dropped a piece of gear, sea star armor, green, that raised the wearer's defense by 1/10. I decided to wear it myself, since my own strength was thin and more defense meant a longer life, and killing it pushed Windsor to level 6, and I checked her over. She sat at level 6 now, legendary quality, her strength 50 before the bonuses that stacked it up around 70, agility 52, defense 52, wisdom 50, mana 500. A hero, light element messenger, her skills healing, light arrow, light shield, plus entangling spell and bewilder, both at blue. She carried authority light at purple and a green hairpin, her loyalty pinned at 100 and her affinity climbing to 87, friendly. With 70 effective strength and 2 blue skills, she could simply flatten any low-tier sea beast now. After I equipped the armor, my own defense ticked up a little, but my base stats were so low it barely registered. I was still level 4, strength 19, agility 19, defense 17, wisdom 20, mana 180, a hero ice element messenger. With Spirit Eye, a green water arrow technique, a purple freezing spell, a green staff and ring, and 100 transformations at epic, no title. One more day of hunting and I'd hit level 5, and every base stat would finally crack 20. I closed the panel and kept moving, and that was when I came on a small floating mountain. Bare rock, no animals, no plants, nothing on the whole thing except a single tree at the peak, and that struck me as wrong. How does exactly one tree grow on barren stone? And I steered closer and ran Spirit Eye over it, and 2 panels opened instead of 1. The tree was a Turtle Spirit Divine Tree, gold quality, level 19, strength 249, agility 225, defense 354. Its skills locked behind too large a level gap to read. The mountain itself was a Jimson mountain turtle, gold quality, level 22, strength 349, agility 291, defense 442, skills also locked, and I felt thoroughly cursed reading it. Yesterday it was the legendary Azure Sea Dragon King. Today, 2 gold beings at once, and were gold creatures just lying around the sea like driftwood. Why did I have only one legendary, only Windsor? And I was genuinely scared now because either of these two could notice me, flick a finger, and that would be the ship gone. Me dead. Everything over. I spun the helm hard, trying to slip away while I still could, and right then the whole mountain shuddered, and 2 enormous eyes opened on its slope, emerald green and oddly gentle. I froze stiff, because I hadn't expected the thing to actually wake, and my mind tore through escape routes and kept circling back to the same dead end. Behind me, Windsor and Huahua watched the mountain turtle nervously and shifted to put themselves between it and me. The Jimson mountain turtle spoke without opening any mouth, the voice simply arriving inside my head, telling me not to be nervous, that it meant no harm, that it had only felt my presence and wanted to invite me up for a chat. I startled hard because this was the first sea beast I'd seen actually talk, and yesterday's had at least worn a half-human shape. I told the boss I had something urgent to attend to, and we could catch up some other time, because I wanted nothing less than to climb aboard a living gold mountain. An hour ago, everyone was calling me boss, and here I was scrambling to call someone else boss. The genuine article, and apparently the title obeys relativity too. The turtle said it drifted with the currents and had simply happened across me today, a human and a brand new lord, which delighted it, so it only wanted to talk. And I started to ease off. With its strength, if it actually wanted me dead, it wouldn't bother with conversation. It would just act. And more than that, it already knew I was a novice lord, which meant it understood things I badly wanted to know. As if reading the thought, it moved, the current surging up to push my ship gently along and set it down on the mountain beneath the divine tree. And I tensed at first, then relaxed once it made no further move. A swell of light gathered under the tree, and out of it stepped an old man, only about 1.5 meters tall. His hair and beard had gone gray, his face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes that same emerald green, a wooden staff in one hand, and he radiated a kind, gentle air. He smiled down at me, raised the staff lightly, and the water around us parted and flowed away, opening a clear space on the mountain. Another point of the staff and a wooden table with 2 stools appeared, fruit and wine vessels already set out, and he invited me to come down and sit. I stared at a man who built miracles with a flick of his wrist, genuinely impressed, then left Mori and the others on the boat, carried Huahua, and walked down with Windsor close behind. Stepping onto the ground, I took a few deep breaths, and it felt exactly like standing on land, except for the occasional fish drifting past to remind me I was still in the sea. I walked up to the old man, bowed slightly, and greeted him as Old Mister, because I understood the value of showing respect to the strong, doubly so to a strong one with manners. He waved off the courtesy and told me to sit, called Windsor Miss, and conjured a third stool for her, and we both took our seats. He looked me over and remarked that he hadn't expected this era's chosen one to be a human. I latched onto that immediately, certain it carried real weight, and asked him what a chosen one was. He said the chosen ones were those picked by Qianmo with the qualifications to become a lord. I asked him to tell me more, and he said it was nothing secret, no harm in sharing. The way he laid it out, every so often across this lord continent, Qianmo selects a batch of people, grants them lord qualifications, and runs them through trial after trial to keep them growing. The chosen are sometimes pulled from beyond the heavens and sometimes drawn from the continent itself. Each era runs a different length, 1 or 2 centuries, sometimes 4 or 5, and the start of a lord trial is the birth of a new era. Every era's trial takers belong to a single race, and before us there had been orcs, the dragon clan, the sea clan, and others. What floored me was the next part, that there are 2 Qianmo in this world, one of the spirit domain and one of the demon domain. They were one and the same once, he explained, but for reasons no one knows they split, like one person carrying 2 separate souls. At first the 2 Qianmo fought and tangled, but because both were the will of the continent, their war gutted the world and brought ruin so total that barely one thing in 10,000 survived. Their own power feeds on the continent's prosperity, so the 2 struck an agreement to never intervene in person. Instead, they carved the Lord continent in half, each cultivating lords on its own side and turning them loose to fight. The Qianmo expand their will as their lords' territories expand, so the more land a cultivated lord holds, the firmer that Qianmo's grip on the continent and the stronger its own will grows. He said that was the bedrock reason the spirit domain and the demon domain were at each other's throats. I asked which side currently held the upper hand, and he told me they were still evenly matched. I asked why. If the whole point was cultivating lords, it didn't just hand us resources and let us grow fast. He laughed and said flowers raised in a greenhouse crumble under hardship, that Shanmo wanted not only to dominate the continent, but to make it flourish. A prosperous continent meant a powerful Qianmo, he went on, and generations of struggle had forged every race into something strong, since war had driven expansion, development, the continent's prosperity. So that was the shape of it. In the end, the Qianmo were strengthening themselves, and that wasn't only about seizing more ground. It was about letting living things multiply and grow hard, and another path to the same throne. I asked why, with so many races of lords supposedly out here, I hadn't run into a single territory. He said this stretch was a designated newcomer zone, where established lords don't drift through easily and can't attack me. So then what about him? I asked. His sea beast race fell outside that scope, he answered with a smile, so I pressed whether the Sea Clan could attack us. That was a separate agreement between his race and Shanmo, the particulars of which even he didn't fully know. And besides, the Sea Clan and his sea beasts weren't the same race at all. I said no way, surprised, since they all came out of the same sea. His race never chooses to take human form, he explained, while the Sea Clan does. I gave him the look you give someone obviously messing with you, sitting across from a 1.5-meter-old man. He laughed it off, telling me this body was only a clone, not his real form. Of course it was, because he was still sitting on his true body the whole time, the mountain itself. I asked whether he knew anything about Cheonmo City, picking a fruit off the table and biting into it as I spoke, relaxed now. The fruit turned out to be a gift, an attribute fruit, so I quickly ran Spirit Eye over the spread. There was Spirit Yuan Purple Grape and Spirit Yuan Blue Luo, both green, each adding 3 to 4 random points, and Profound Yuan Ginseng, blue, worth 5 to 10 random points. No reason to hesitate. Good things don't wait, so I passed one of each to Windsor and Huahua. What caught me off guard was that these fruits didn't dissolve into airflow and vanish the way attribute items usually did. They stayed solid, real things to be eaten slowly. The turtle noticed my expression and explained that any heavenly treasure soaked in Mother Essence stops turning to airflow, and I asked what Mother Essence was and whether the soaked fruit left seeds. He said Mother Essence sold cheaply in Cheonmo City, and no, soaking left no seeds, their seeds sold only in Cheonmo City as well. Then he walked me through Cheonmo City itself, and by his account there are 3 special cities in this world. The Spirit Domain Cheonmo City, the Demon Domain Cheonmo City, and Chaos City. Chaos City stands open to everyone across the whole Lord continent, which makes it the most prosperous of the 3. My merit points, the ones earned fighting in the Demon Domain, could only be spent at the Spirit Domain Cheonmo City. I chatted with him a good while longer, and when the moment felt right I stood to take my leave, thanking him sincerely, because I genuinely gained a great deal from him. He laughed it all off, saying he'd only shared a little common knowledge of the world. Then he added that since I'd kept him company so long, he ought to send me off with a small gift. He called to the divine tree to bring some of its sap over for me. The turtle spirit divine tree shuddered, and a 1-meter-tall boy popped into being, who first shot the turtle a glare and grumbled that the old mountain turtle was forever using its things to do himself favors, then chucked a small wooden bottle into my hands. I caught it and thanked him for the gift, calling him Old Mr. 2, and the tree huffed that it was clearly his thing, so why was I thanking that big turtle? As I started to bow, the Jimson mountain turtle stopped me and told the tree to quit pretending to be a child, shameless old thing, then waved off my courtesy and said I could go. I eyed the few spirit fruits left on the table but felt too awkward to grab them, and the turtle simply handed them over, saying they were useless to him now, then passed me a larger wooden bottle of Mother Essence to take as well. I was overjoyed and thanked him again, climbed aboard, waved to all of them, and pulled away. Back on the surface, Huahua went right back to storing energy. Windsor and the rest returned to their rods, and I headed for the room to tally the haul. The hunt itself had netted close to 2,000 white stone, plus 1 green piece of gear and the usual scatter of basic materials and supplies. The real prizes, though, were the information I'd pried out of the turtle, and those 3 heavenly treasures, which had stacked a respectable pile of attribute points onto me, and the bottle from the divine tree, which I read with Spirit Eye, Turtle Spirit Tree Essence, purple. That improves the quality of sea beasts when consumed, and excellent. I went out, found Little Blue, fed it straight to him, then handed him one of each of the 3 fruits too, and after he swallowed it all, I checked him. Little Blue, Deep Sea Giant Whale, now purple, level 6, Strength 40, Agility 35, Defense 36, with Charge, Bite, and a brand new Thunder Sword. The changes were big, because his quality had jumped to purple, he'd picked up a skill, and apparently he carried a lightning attribute I never knew about. On top of that, his stats rose 16 points, 5 to Strength, 5 to Agility, 6 to Defense, all from the 3 treasures. I patted his head, turning over whether Little Blue counted as Sea Clan or Sea Beast. The turtle had drawn the line on whether they chose to take human form, which meant the choice would be Little Blue's to make someday, and I'd ask him when the time came. First generation sea beasts had to hit level 19 before they could transform anyway, so that was a long way off. I checked my assets, somewhere around 2,300 white stone, then looked up what the next wooden boat upgrade demanded. 1,000 wood, 2,000 iron nails, 100 copper block, 5,000 white stone all told. I'd cleared roughly 2,000 today, and the money tree would shake out 500 more tonight, so I could upgrade tomorrow to a level 6 boat. I was already looking forward to what level 6 unlocked, because by now I understood that every 6th level in this world marked a real threshold. I lay back in the room watching the channels and turning over my next moves until evening arrived. I switched on the recharging bright lamp and the room flooded with light, a world better than matches and candles, and I ate the dinner Mori made and sent everyone off to rest. I took Windsor and Huawa out to the bow to sit under the night sky and talk, and pulled a bottle of red wine, the two of us sipping it slow, even Huawa cradling a tiny wooden cup. When we'd had enough to go pleasantly warm, I scooped Windsor up and carried her back to the room, leaving Huawa outside to keep charging the boat. We shed our clothes and slid into bed, and the luxury set really was something, the whole of you wrapped in warmth. The wine had left a rosy flush across Windsor's face that made you want to bite her, and I held off, though, with the evening's business to clear first. I plucked the money tree, white and purple stone together, coming to 593, then skimmed the trade list Wang Mok had sent over, which held nothing useful. When he passed it along, he'd promised to repay the white stone soon, and I told him not to rush it. Next, I dug out 3 ore crafting blueprints, and I'd had 4 of these sitting forgotten in my inventory for days, and only stumbled on them today doing a slot check. All 3 green quality. I ran 100 transformations on the first, and it turned into a dock construction blueprint, blue, that greatly benefits a territory built near the coast. 5,000 wood, 500 stone, 200 iron to build. My territory would sit on a sea island for certain, so a dock would absolutely matter. I burned the second and got a well construction blueprint, blue, 300 stone and 100 iron, the text reminding me that no one in a territory can do without a water source, and another blueprint, a lucky day, the last one I ran through and it broke through, the quality leaping 2 full tiers to purple. A life bracelet, purple, that delays aging and speeds injury recovery. And the moment I read it, I swore out loud because the breakthrough had jumped 2 levels at once. Then I read the rest and deflated, because the thing wasn't gear, and added no attributes, it only sped healing and slowed aging, which felt thin for a purple. A letdown honestly mismatched to its quality, but nothing to be done about it now, so I turned to Windsor and told her the bracelet was hers. I handed it over and explained what it did, and the instant she heard it could slow aging, she lit up. She threw herself into my arms and kissed my face, then slipped the bracelet onto her pale wrist and kept turning her hand to admire it. A system tip floated up, Windsor's affinity toward me risen by 5. Status upgraded to admiring. Her affinity had climbed 5 points off a single bracelet, and I was thrilled, because I'd badly underestimated what an anti-aging item does to a woman. I told her I'd given her a gift and asked, smiling, whether she wasn't going to thank me, and she looked at me, honestly puzzled, and said hadn't she just kissed me? That choked me for a second, but I wasn't letting her off that easily, so I said a kiss didn't count. No chance, and that I got to decide. She asked, looking right at me, how I wanted to be thanked then, and watching me appraise her openly, she seemed to catch on. Her fair face went visibly red and she ducked her head, shy, and she hadn't refused, only lowered her eyes, and there was no missing what that meant. With a single turn, the two of us were tangled together, my mouth on her red lips, my hands beginning to wander, and slowly she pulled me in tight and started answering back. The boat sailed on under the moon, riding a little rougher tonight, rocking with us. In the early morning sunlight slid through the window and brushed across my eyes, easing me up out of a dream. I cracked my eyes against the brightness and turned to Windsor beside me, her smooth, fragrant shoulder bare above the sheet, and I smiled, leaned down to kiss her forehead, then got up and dressed. A new day, and Mori was already on breakfast, the other 5 out fishing on the deck, so I grabbed a stool, sat off to the side, and started my own day on the resource fishing rod. The first pole was a lounge chair blueprint, white, a comfortable chair to enjoy your leisure on, 4 wood and 10 iron nails, another quality of life trinket. The resource rod generally coughed up nothing high tier, though it still beat the basic rod by a mile, and that first rod had given me almost nothing of value in 6 full days. I bought 4 wood, crafted 10 iron nails, and built the chair, then carried it to the bow and stretched out on it, and it rocked, far comfier than the wooden stool. Back to work. Huawa fluttered over and settled in my arms, and I stroked her little head, because she hadn't had purple crystal in 2 days, and she couldn't grow off hunting in the sea either. So apparently combat did nothing for her. The Jimson mountain turtle had told me her kind grows by eating elemental crystals of their own attribute, or special crystals like purple crystal in a pinch. The problem was I had no way to get elemental crystals, and the purple crystal route ran unstable, and burning my talent to chase it wasn't worth it. The rod twitched, and the day's second item came up, a lumberyard blueprint, white, 300 wood and 20 iron, the text scolding that a territory without logging is incomplete. A far better blueprint than the lounge chair despite sharing the same white tier. Windsor wandered over, sat beside me, and pressed a cup of water into my hand. I asked why she hadn't slept a while longer, and she smiled gently and said she'd always woken at this hour. She was used to it, and I teased her that last night had been a little different. She shot me a charming glare and went back to ignoring the man who never stopped needling her. After last night, though, the two of us had become inseparable, no distance left between us. Before, Windsor had always set herself a rung below me, a subordinate, and only now did she truly feel like an equal I could talk to as a partner. I was glad to see it because I'd have no end of subordinates down the road, but I'd never find another lord to stand beside me, so a hero companion who could meet me as an equal was the best I could hope for. They wouldn't betray me, and they'd put my interests first in everything. And simply perfect. I took her hand, smiling and feeling the warmth in it. She went happy and easy, plainly content with the life she had now. The last item came up, a black sphere, a poison elemental bomb, a special item that inflicts poison corrosion on creatures with power scaling against the target's poison resistance. And that lit me up. A special item, and an offensive one, another small trump card, and I tucked it away certain it would matter someday. And the resource rod's uses for the day were spent. A solid haul overall. I ate breakfast, and while I was eating, Chiamo dropped another round of announcements. The first congratulated everyone on clearing the first week, and pushed us to keep working. The second opened the arena, telling us to read the rules ourselves and take part. The third warned that random events would start cropping up on the journey ahead, so be ready. 3 announcements, 1 piece of information each, and the first confirmed a week in this world runs 6 days. The second opened an arena, plainly meant to push lords to sharpen their personal strength, while the third, that random events would occur, was too vague to do much with, and random means uncertain, good or bad with no telling which. Run into something good and great, but run into something bad, like that Jimson mountain turtle yesterday, and if it had been hostile I'd have died 100 times over. It had been kind though, and I'd walked away rich. The kind of change that makes you eager and uneasy at once. I opened my personal panel and found a new column, Arena, sitting beside Territory, with 3 options inside: Enter, Points Ranking, and Points Mall. The Points Mall caught me off guard, since I hadn't expected to buy things here. I opened it, and found no basic materials, just the relatively precious stuff, equipment, blueprints, common or summon cards and the like. Plenty of it tempting. Then I opened the Points Ranking and saw it empty, no one on it yet. And finally I clicked Enter, and a wall of rules popped up. The arena randomly matches opponents, winner gains points and loser sheds them, and spectators may bet, and the 2 combatants may also wager privately. And there is no death in the arena. Points can be exchanged for items in the Points Mall, with the spent points deducted from your ranking total. And the top 10,000 on the Arena Points Ranking get to join the Weekend 2 Domains competition. The first 3 were just house rules, but the last 2 demanded real attention. Point 4 meant I could cash points for mall items, but if my points weren't deep my ranking would crater. And if it sank too far, I'd miss the threshold in point 5 and lose my spot in the Weekend 2 Domains competition. Confronting the Demon Domain would be dangerous, no question, but win there and the rewards were huge. Once I'd absorbed all that, I set down my bowl and chopsticks, went to lie on the bed, and chose to enter. The moment I crossed over, a flood of noisy information slammed my ears, and my mind went briefly foggy. I caught my footing fast and started taking stock, and I looked like myself from the real world, though I understood this was only a consciousness body. I was standing on a corridor at the very top of the structure, with rows of seats curving below into a full circle, a round arena at the dead center, and light screens hanging above the ring to let the crowd watch the matches clearly. Someone called out, asking if even the boss had shown up, and I turned to find Wang Mok. He'd been talking with me every night lately and running errands for me, so I felt fairly warm toward him. I gave him a nod and said I'd just come to look around, then asked how he'd been. He grinned and said that thanks to my help he was doing pretty well now, then offered to walk me through the arena since he'd already played around. I let him lead me down the corridor to a staircase, and we went down and each picked a seat. A red panel popped up in front of both of us with 3 buttons: Start, Watch, and Shop. Wang Mok pointed me through it, because Start matched you with an opponent for a bout, and Watch let you pick a match to play on your own panel, though most people just watched the big screen at the ring's center where the hottest fights aired. Shop sold things, mostly food and drink, all virtual but uncannily real to eat, and all paid for in actual white stone, which he figured few people would bother with. Simple enough, and I asked if he'd fought a match yet and what it was like, and he had. 1 match, and he said you drop into a random arena, his had been a grassland, and he'd heard there were oceans, snow mountains, and other environments too. He laid out his whole experience and the secondhand details he'd gathered, and I said I'd play around and hit start. The next instant I stood in a desert facing a burly middle-aged man with a great axe and an iron shield. I checked him first. No AU, level 5. The rest hidden, which didn't surprise me since Wang Mok had told me arena matches hide all opponent attributes. Even quality. While I read him, he read me back. Ha Shin, level 4. My level still suppressed on purpose, though I figured 1 more sea hunt today would carry me to 5. Noe Yu saw a name matching the famous boss and didn't think twice about it. Since he'd never seen what I looked like and the world was full of men named Ha Shin, what he did notice was my level, 1 below his, and he laughed, certain of easy points. He called me unlucky, said that while the arena spared your life the pain was real, and urged me to just surrender and save myself the hurt. I didn't care in the slightest, because everyone had been cooped up on their ships for ages, and the first time they met fellow Blue Star folk, the urge to show off ran hot. I told him plainly that I wouldn't surrender and he could start whenever he liked. He shook his head and said I wouldn't shed tears until I saw the coffin. then charged. I didn't move an inch, only raised my staff and spoke the freezing spell, and a thread of white light gathered and converged on his legs. His steps went heavy, and when he looked down, he found ice crystals climbing up them. He stared at me, stunned, blurting out that I had a talent, that my luck was too good, since talents were still rare and he hadn't expected to draw one. He knew right then he'd lost, so he called out for me to stop. He surrendered, and I cut off the water arrow I'd been about to loose. Then he asked, hesitant, whether I might happen to be the real Hashin, the boss himself, but I ignored him and simply left, because chatting with every single person would bleed my whole day dry. Watching me walk off without a word, his hunch only hardened, and he kicked himself for not asking to add me as a friend. A good chance missed. Back in my seat, I checked the ranking and saw I'd picked up 10 points. Wang Mok was gone, off in a match somewhere, so I started another without waiting. This time I drew a thoroughly ordinary opponent and finished him with one freezing spell and one water arrow, and the points rose another 10. So a win was worth 10 flat, and I just didn't know how the scoring would shift at higher levels. After that I opened the shop, spent 1 white stone on a juice, cheaper than outside since it was virtual, and took a sip, and the taste came through identical to the real thing. Wang Mok reappeared right then. His match finished, and the first thing out of him was a curse that he'd run into Baekseol. He asked if I was done too, and I said his face told me he'd lost, and to tell me exactly what happened. I knew Baekseol well enough, since she sat second only to me, so I paid close attention to anything about her. And Wang Mok said she definitely had a talent, certainly something tied to perception. Their venue had been a forest, and the moment he appeared he'd gone invisible with his own talent, but she found him before long anyway, and he'd kept shifting position, and it had done nothing. That surprised me, that he had a talent of his own now, invisibility, which was life-saving and let him land sneak attacks, supportive but genuinely good. As for him calling Baekseol's talent perception type, I wasn't ready to commit. All I could say was that her talent gave her very sharp perception, not that the talent itself was a perception talent. I asked what level she was, because if her level ran high and her talent quality wasn't low, I might actually lose to her. He said it was level 5. Not too worrying because I was nearly level 5 myself, and as long as her talent wasn't legendary quality, I had no fear of her, and I traded a few more words with him, then left the arena. Outside, Windsor and the others were already fishing, and Mori was on lunch, and I hadn't realized how long I'd spent in the arena, since it had felt like nothing. After lunch I started the afternoon hunt, smooth and uneventful, 2 hours gone fast. When the boat surfaced I sent everyone back to fishing and went to check my assets. Just over 4,200 white stone now, still more than 800 short of the upgrade materials. I'd have to wait for evening, when the afternoon's catch plus the money tree haul should cover it. I'd also hit level 5 on this dive, so I pulled up my information. Level 5, Strength 27, Agility 27, Defense 26, Wisdom 25, Mana 250. A hero, Ice Element Messenger, with Spirit Eye Green Water Arrow Technique, Purple Freezing Spell, a Green Staff Ring, and Sea Star Armor. In 100 transformations at Epic, no title. My base stats were nearly 30, thanks mostly to the Turtle Spirit Fruits, and as long as I didn't cross a legendary level being, I was basically unbeatable at my own level. In this world, the gulf between qualities was simply a chasm, and short of impossibly heaven-defying luck, eating treasure after treasure without repeats, it couldn't be bridged, and since I couldn't upgrade the boat yet, I went back into the arena. I played all afternoon and never once hit a decent opponent, just a string of easy wins, and when I came out it was evening with Mori's dinner waiting. I sold the afternoon's catch first, keeping only a white quality ore blueprint, then ate. After dinner I shook the money tree for 598, which put my assets over 5,300, so I bought the materials and hit upgrade. When it finished I checked the result. Wooden boat, level 6, 40 meters by 12. Facilities now ran to a core cabin, 2 large rooms, 4 small rooms, a warehouse, a public restroom, the fishing gallery, a mast and a helm. Power came from multi-ore linkage power propulsion, with its technologies stacked as ship drainage at level 3, ship thermal energy at level 1, ship automation at level 1, multi-ore linkage propulsion at level 2, and ship diving weakened at level 2. Special ability diving. The jump was real this time. A mast and a helm added, 1 more large room, 2 more small rooms, and the restroom split off into a separate public one, though the core cabin kept its own, and the trend was clear. Down the road I'd be fully separated from the commoners, which didn't surprise me, because a lord can't be rubbing shoulders with commoners all day. I only had to manage the heroes well, issue orders, and let them carry them out. Then I looked ahead to the next upgrade, since level 6 was a threshold, 2,000 wood, 4,000 iron nails, 200 copper block, and 1 ship core. Beyond the heavier basic materials, a ship core was now required, and I didn't know whether it'd be needed for every upgrade from here, or only this jump from 6 to 7. Either way, I'd have to find a way to stockpile ship cores, just in case. I didn't even know if they could be bought, since probably no one yet understood what a ship core actually did, but I could test the market tomorrow. The basic materials came to 10,000 white stone, about 5 days of saving at my current rate. Fine, no rush, and when the money came I'd upgrade the power technology first. I closed the panel, settled Huahua and Little Blue as usual, undressed and got into bed, and Windsor's smooth body folded against mine, and I held her and kissed her cheek. Then came the day's use of 100 transformations, and first the day's paddle blueprint. Not worth much, so I just used it and it became a green commoner summon card, which I pocketed for tomorrow. Next I took out the leftover green ore blueprint and ran 100 transformations, getting a navigator summon card, blue, that summons a navigator to steer you clear of countless disasters at sea. This one wasn't random, it specified the profession, and it landed perfectly since my new boat had a helm and a mast. I'd summon him tomorrow and put him on the wheel for good, so Little Blue wouldn't have to stand guard every day. For the last use I burned a white commoner summon card I'd picked off Wang Mok's trade list, ran 100 transformations and looked at the result with a flat little sigh. Another summon card, just bumped to green. 3 uses today, all 3 summon cards, nothing to write home about beyond the small windfall of the navigator. Then I caught myself and almost laughed at how spoiled I'd gotten, complaining about green quality items. The last few days of fat hauls had gone to my head, until I'd forgotten this was the normal, and only my normal at that, since most players never came close to my floor. With the day's tasks done, I skipped the chat, since it would only eat into what mattered. I flipped over, pinned Windsor beneath me, and she let out a small gasp that I caught with a kiss, leaving her only muffled sounds. Bit by bit, the whole room held nothing but heavy breathing and soft murmurs. The next day, I opened my eyes to find the blanket gone, both of us lying bare on the bed, and the sight of Windsor's pale skin and fine figure landed like a blow, blood going straight to both ends. She opened her eyes to find me already coming toward her, and she went from groggy to awake to dazed, then answered, then finally went limp. After the storm passed, I held her and kissed her cheek until we'd both come back down. She murmured that we ought to get up. It was late, leaning into me with a faint flush still on her face. I agreed and started dressing, saying as I did that it felt much hotter today than yesterday, that this week's disaster was likely extreme heat. I'd felt the temperature shift sharply, and for the first time the blanket had ended up kicked clean off in the night, which had never happened before. I needed to get ahead of this early. Windsor agreed it was hotter but said it was still bearable, dressing slower than me since she had more layers. I said I should still plan ahead, and she fixed me with a steady look and told me she believed I could handle these things because she'd watched me climb from a single wooden plank to all this. I smiled and told her not to worry. Walking out, it was hotter outside than in, the sun gone white and blasting harsh light down. I used yesterday's 3 summon cards first, and 3 men appeared, 1 middle-aged and 2 younger, and I checked them over. Lee Rook, excellent quality, level 5, strength 27, agility 25, defense 26, a navigator who could judge wind direction, draw sea charts, and pilot ships. Wang Yui and Wang Rim, both excellent, both level 3, both sailors who could paddle, manage the mast, and maintain the ship. I hadn't expected the 2 random cards to both produce professions, and sailors at that, a role I could use right now. All 3 bowed and greeted me as their lord, and I waved off the formality and told Lee Rook I'd leave the upcoming voyage in his hands. I took the map fragment out and passed it to him, telling him the black dot on it was our destination, and he glanced it over and assured me he'd keep the ship sailing safely. I sent the 3 of them off to their work, then checked the survival point ranking. I held first with 1,560, Baekseol second at 971, Danton third at 873, Lee Kyo fourth at 872, Ye Baekpeng fifth at 794, Hagawa Hina sixth at 783, James seventh at 783, James 7th at 753. Everyone had gained a good chunk, but I kept my lead, and I figured pushing the boat to level 7 would haul in a big pile of points. I closed the ranking and looked at my white stone. Just over 200 left. Nothing I could do with that. I went to the lounge chair at the bow, stretched out, and started working the resource rod while turning over what I needed to do, and the top priority was surviving this week's extreme heat. I opened the technology section to hunt for anything useful, and there were relevant entries: cabin cooling, ship temperature control, but not one met its activation conditions. Plenty of others tempted me too, ship flying tech and the enviable weapon systems among them, and none could be activated yet. I let myself imagine the day I'd have them all lit up, piloting fleets and leading troops across the sea. Since technology was no help right now, I'd have to find another road. Right then the first rod item came up, and my face lit because it glowed blue, a commoner summon card, blue, the kind that lets high-quality commoners push a territory above its neighbors and make new knowledge easier to learn. No chance I'd waste this summoning a commoner. It had to feed 100 transformations, a purple at minimum and a gold if luck smiled. Soon after, another commoner summon card, this one white, and I burned it outright. A middle-aged woman stepped out with the chef profession, so I handed her the cooking for the other commoners and kept Mori as my own exclusive cook. One last pull left on the resource rod, and I quietly hoped for a surprise. I didn't have to wait long, because the last item came up glowing only white, and I deflated a little reading it. A thermostat blueprint, white, a machine to hold a steady temperature. The flavor text smugly telling me to use my brain and work out the uses. 20 iron, 10 copper block, 5 electronic components to build. That caught my attention, because I'd seen this thermostat before. I opened my personal shop, and there it was, this week's special offer at 500 white stone, which I'd noticed earlier and skipped. So the key to surviving this disaster was the thermostat, except it only held a temperature. It couldn't change the one you had. Then I noticed the shop had a new item today, ice cubes. 10 white stone each. I bought one, and it came as a cube roughly half a meter to a side, which clicked the whole picture into place. Xianmo's plan was for everyone to drop the temperature by buying ice and then trap it with a thermostat, riding out the scorching week that way. Only there was a catch, because the thermostat merely slowed the loss, so the ice still melted, which meant buying cubes endlessly. And one cube couldn't cool a space, so holding a livable temperature would bleed a fortune in white stone, a dull knife sawing through your savings. Once I understood the trap, I smiled, because I knew freezing spell. Why couldn't I just sell ice myself? Price it 1 or 2 white stone under the shop and there'd be no shortage of buyers, because the sea is the last place that ever runs short of water. So this was a business with zero cost to me. The thought was so good I actually laughed out loud, and it seemed I might not need 5 or 6 days to upgrade the boat after all. Windsor called me right then. Breakfast was ready, and I ate fast. I told them we wouldn't fish today, we'd go straight to hunting, because I didn't have enough white stone for even a thermostat and I needed to make some money first. Nobody objected. I started the boat and dove, then handed the helm to Windsor, since with Lee Roop the navigator aboard I didn't need to steer it myself anymore. I had my own work now. I called 2 commoners to the edge of the boat and started casting freezing seawater into cubes the same size as the shops. Then had them carry each one into the empty large room, which had space to stack plenty of ice. One shop cube ran 10 white stone. Mine would go for 9 1 under, which felt fair to me, generous even, since I hadn't dropped it too. For 2 hours, while Windsor hunted below, I made ice, resting whenever my mana ran dry and going straight back to it the moment it recovered. I even regretted yesterday's wasted time, because why hadn't I thought this far the moment I saw the thermostat yesterday? I scolded myself for not being sharp enough, not sensitive enough by half. By the time the boat surfaced, I'd stopped, and I asked a commenter how many we had. He said exactly 100, and I ran the math. 100 cubes in 2 hours, 9 white stone each, 900 white stone, comparable to the hunting hall itself. 10 hours a day would be 4,500 white stone, and the moment that number landed, my head went hot, because I could upgrade the boat again in 2 days. I sent the others off to fish and took the items Windsor handed me from the hunt, sold the basic materials straight off, leaving 3 pieces. Then I sat on the lounge chair, pulled Windsor down onto my lap, and held her, because I no longer thought much of the trickle of whitestone fishing earned, too little to be worth her time. Better to have her keep me company and give me a little emotional value besides, and I didn't mind that either. I took Windsor's small hand and started looking through the items. The first one made me frown, another white commoner summon card, which I used on the spot and sent the man off to find work. Windsor saw the frown, touched my forehead, and asked with real concern what was wrong. I smiled and told her it was nothing serious, that I'd only noticed an oddly high number of commoner summon cards turning up this week, and found it strange. Then the 2 domains battle from the arena surfaced in my mind. This weekend's clash wouldn't be some small skirmish, it would be 2 real armies meeting, because after a full week everyone would be carrying a stack of commoner summon cards. Picturing 20,000 ships squaring off, I felt a genuine thrill of anticipation. I pulled my thoughts back and checked the second item. A quarry blueprint, white, 300 wood and 20 iron, the text insisting no territory can do without a quarry or build magnificent walls. An essential. The third was an iron pot blueprint, which I used at once, since as commoner numbers grew I'd be eating apart from them, and an extra pot fit just right. Once that was sorted, I got up and walked alone to the large room, where the ice was stored, Windsor staying on the lounge chair playing with Wawa. I bought a thermostat from the shop, a rectangular block of white and blue with round holes across the top breathing out pale cold air. I couldn't work out what it ran on for power, so I just set it down to hold the temperature there and headed back to the bow to make more ice. Tedious work. I asked Windsor to fetch some fruit drinks from the warehouse, and she came back soon with drinks and fruit, Mori trailing right behind her. That stopped me. What was Mori doing out here? I sat there genuinely puzzled, the cold seeping off my fingers, the ice piling up behind me, the start of a question already forming on my tongue. Mori crossed the deck and held out a folded blueprint, telling me the crew had just turned it up in the morning hall. I took it and let Spirit Eye unpack the details, and a quiet little grin pulled at me. It was a bedding set blueprint, permanent, the kind of thing I could keep firing off in the build menu forever. The flavor text even wished me a good sleep, which felt like the system being smug about how rough my crew had it. My people were still bedded down on bare wooden frames padded with straw and a scrap of cloth, and that was about as humble as a lord's household could get. I activated it on the spot so the recipe would live in my construction tab, ready whenever I wanted to spoil somebody. Mori bowed and slipped off without another word, leaving me to my ice. I chewed the fruit Windsor had pressed into my hand and kept conjuring ice cubes while the morning burned away. Noon arrived before I'd really clocked it, so I bolted lunch, washed it down with a chilled drink, and that was when Mori found me again. She mentioned, almost apologetically, that with several new mouths aboard, flour and fresh water were both running thin. That hit me like a misstep on a stair, because she was right and I'd been too busy counting Whitestone to notice. The flour producer and the seawater converter both needed leveling, and the planting space box's vegetables would be ripe today on top of it. I told her not to worry, that I'd take care of all of it, and once she'd gone, I headed for the little room where those two machines sat. The seawater converter was sitting at level 4, good for 20 liters a day, which had felt generous back when it was mostly Windsor and me. The next tier wanted 80 plastic, 150 wood, and 200 white stone, and I had 83 plastic squirreled away from days of hoarding the stuff instead of dumping it on the market. I pushed the upgrade through, and level 5 doubled my output to 40 liters. The level after that demanded 160 plastic, 300 wood, and 400 white stone, which was steeper, but I had commoners likely landing this week and I'd rather overbuild than ration. So I opened the trade channel, searched plastic, and bought the cheapest listings until I'd stacked 160 units for 300 white stone total. Then came the embarrassing part. Wood plus the stone fee added up to a clean 1,000, and I was carrying 931, which is a humbling number to discover mid-upgrade. I trotted down to the warehouse, sold off a batch of vegetables to close the gap, and shoved the converter up to level 6, where it pumped out 80 liters a day. Water was a solved problem for the foreseeable future. The flour producer would have to wait for tomorrow because my purse was scraped clean and I have limits. Back at the bow, I went right on making ice, hungrier than ever to print money, because nothing motivates a former charity case loaner like the smell of a profit margin. The sun slid down without my noticing, and by the time night crept in, I'd eaten dinner and handed the planting spacebox harvest over to Mori, telling her the planting and sowing were hers from now on. In the core cabin, I scooped the day's coins off the money tree, stripped down, and dropped onto the bed with Windsor tucked against me, thumbing open chat to see what the world had gotten up to. The channel was busy gushing over a match between Lee Kyo and Ye Baekpung. People said Lee Kyo's arrows came too fast to track and that Ye Baekpung handled her shield and scimitar like a born duelist. And then, predictably, some old creep steered the whole thread toward how pretty they both were. Somebody warned him Ye Baekpung had zero use for men. Somebody else asked what about Lee Kyo, and the conversation degraded from there in the way these things always do. Still, I mined a little signal out of the noise. Lee Kyo was an archer. Ye Baekpung looked like a warrior, and that was worth knowing. Then my own name surfaced, and the tone curdled. One player marveled that the boss had never once shown up on the arena points list. Another insisted I couldn't crack even the top 10,000. A third confirmed he'd looked and I wasn't there. That was when Hagawa Hina crawled out of his hole to pile on, sniffing that my strength was nothing and I'd only fluked my way to first in survival points. A defender shot back that Wang Mok's old photos proved the boss was plenty dangerous, and the thread split into camps. Ever since I'd cursed Hagawa Hina out, the channel had taken to calling him Little Son as a running joke, which only deepened his loathing for me, and he hissed that the real threat was the hero standing next to me, not me, and that I'd better pray we never crossed in the arena. I stopped reading. There was no profit in bickering with him, so I just hoped to draw him in a match soon and settle it with my hands instead of my thumbs. Then I pulled up Wang Mok's daily trade list, since I was still 2 items short of a full 100 transformations run. It was the usual sad parade, mostly bread and wall blueprints and other junk I wouldn't touch. The single green quality listing was a pillow, so I grabbed it for 40 white stone, which left me at 733, and then I traded for a purple stone too. I decided to spend my last 100 transformation slot on the purple stone rather than the pillow, because a guaranteed green tier object meant less to me than feeding Huahua. She was gold quality now, and every point of strength I poured into her would earn me far more than some trinket ever could. First I pulled out the pillow and triggered 100 transformations on it, and a sofa bloomed onto the floor. The base was white, threaded with gold and blue embroidery, and the whole thing looked obnoxiously expensive for a man drifting on the open sea. Spirit Eye tagged it as a luxury sofa, blue quality, and the description noted it was good for rest and for, in its words, romantic things with one's beloved, which made my face go flat because the system has no shame. Windsor, beside me, lit up and said it was beautiful. I glanced at the girl in my arms and decided maybe the description had a point. The second slot went to the purple stone, and out came another purple crystal. My third straight, which told me purple stone transformations were almost suspiciously stable. The last slot held a blue commoner summon card, and I'd been quietly betting on this one all night, so I muttered a little prayer and triggered the talent. Then I nearly fell off the bed laughing, because the blue card had bloomed into gold, a genuine legendary hero summon card, and I hollered that the luck gods had possessed me and blown the whole thing wide open. I kissed Windsor hard, then made myself breathe. Spirit Eye confirmed it, a gold hero summon card, the promise of infinite possibility, and even though I'd half expected the jackpot, the confirmation still felt like winning. I was reaching to use it when Windsor caught my wrist. She asked, perfectly reasonably what I'd do if it summoned a man, here, in our current state of undress. I smacked my own forehead, because in the rush of celebration I'd forgotten that a male hero materializing into the scene would be a disaster. So I tucked the card away to summon in the morning instead, since a few hours changed nothing. I told Windsor I'd gotten ahead of myself and we'd handle it tomorrow. Then announced, with a grin I knew was wicked, that for now we had our own business to attend to. Her face went scarlet and she pressed close, and I told her that since she'd been wise enough to stop me, tonight's reward was hers, and rolled her gently up on top. She gave a soft, scandalized sound and buried her burning face against me, complaining without complaining that her lord was too much. But she didn't pull away, because as long as I was happy she'd go along with anything, and at that point the polite thing is to let the camera drift away. Heat woke me, not the alarm. I cracked my eyes to a bed gone damp with sweat, and an empty space where Windsor had been, since she rose like clockwork every morning. I dressed and stepped out, and the air hit me like the inside of an oven. Sweat sheeted off me in seconds, and I figured a full day outside in this would cook a man to death. Down at the fishing corridor, I found Windsor and the crew already soaked through, and this was only morning, which left me dreading noon. I set a few hands to hauling ice cubes out of the storage room and broke out some iced drinks, but the cubes melted almost as fast as they hit the deck, gone in minutes. And I scowled, because that approach was hopeless. So I went to the warehouse and dug out the cooler, which could now drop the local temperature by 8 degrees. And even outdoors, within a small bubble, it worked like a little air conditioner and made the heat survivable again. The trouble was that the warehouse itself couldn't go without cooling, or the supplies would rot, so I pulled a crisis warning device. No, a thermostat blueprint, white quality, a simple machine for holding a steady temperature with a flavor line daring me to figure out its uses. It wanted 20 iron, 10 copper, and 5 electronic components. So I bought the materials and built it, set a couple of hands to shifting ice cubes into the warehouse, and got the unit running until the room held a stable chill. With that sorted, I finally pulled out last night's gold hero card. I was honestly buzzing about what would step out of it, so I used it, and a flash of golden light folded down to reveal her. She was tall and lean in a black bodysuit that hid nothing, with cropped black hair and faintly red pupils, and the detail that stopped me cold was the pair of cat ears on her head and the black tail flicking at the base of her spine. A beast-eared girl, of all the roles I could have gotten. She bowed slightly, laid the hand holding a short black blade across her chest, and greeted me as her lord, her voice flat, her face cold, every inch the aloof type. When I asked her name, she told me to call her Dark Moon, and Spirit Eye laid out the rest. She was a legendary, only level 3, a night hunter, which meant a warrior, and the short blade in her grip confirmed it. Her stats ran 30-some across strength, agility, defense, and wisdom, with 350 mana, skills called Darkness Blade, Darkness Erosion, and Moonshadow, a green shadow blade in hand. Loyalty pinned at 100. Her affinity sat at 55, the friendly tier, which actually surprised me, since that was 5 points above where Windsor had started, and it made me wonder whether the cold front was just a mask. A warrior also rounded out my roster nicely, because I wanted my heroes to cover different ground rather than stepping on each other's toes. Then I remembered the Dark Element skill stone gathering dust in my space, so I dug it out. It was Shadow Stealth, blue quality, letting the user melt into shadow to hide body and aura, with a 30% damage bonus on strikes launched from the dark. And the only requirement was being a Dark Element messenger. I handed it over and told her she qualified perfectly, and she glanced at the stone, caught my nod, and used it on the spot. A chime confirmed her affinity toward me had climbed another 5, which I'd expected. I followed it up by pulling out a green Ling Yan gold fruit, and 3 other heavenly treasures. A Spirit Yuan purple grape, a Spirit Yuan blue luo, and a Profound Yuan ginseng, one of each, and offered them across. Dark Moon's composure cracked for a second, surprised I'd be carrying 4 separate attribute fruits, with none lower than green, but instead of taking them, she just stood there. Confused, I asked what was wrong, and she finally said, looking up into my eyes, that she couldn't accept rewards she hadn't earned, that she'd done nothing yet. That made me smile, because I hadn't pegged her for such a stubborn sense of honor. So I asked why she'd taken the skill stone, then, and she answered that she'd assumed that one was a welcome gift, which left me without a comeback. I told her to take these 2 and get strong fast, that calling herself unworthy was nonsense when she was already mine, and that from now on her job was guarding me personally. Her loyalty was 100, so I didn't worry for a heartbeat about her motives. Something flickered behind her eyes, her lashes trembling, and without another word she took the fruits and ate them, one by one. The 4 treasures raised her stats by 19 points total, 5 each into strength, agility, and defense, and 4 into wisdom, and her affinity jumped another 12 to 72, the intimate tier. That's the gift of a strong foundation, I marveled, since she'd hit intimate in a single afternoon when Windsor had taken so much longer. I told her to follow me out, and as I left the warehouse she startled me by sinking straight into my shadow, which is not how I'd pictured Shadow Stealth working at all. Out on deck I had her surface and introduced her to the others. Windsor offered a gentle smile and her name. Dark Moon answered with just her own, and I told Windsor to walk her through our setup. The two of them headed back to the core cabin together, and I picked up the resource fishing rod to start the day's draws. The first thing I reeled in was a green item quality enhancement card, which boosted an item to a higher tier when it worked. I pulled out the glass bottle of Azure Sea Dragon blood and used the card on it, and nothing changed. The blood still reading blue when I checked. The enhancement had failed, and while that stung, a green card carries lousy odds, so I braced for it. The next two draws gave me a green commoner summon card and another white thermostat blueprint, which surprised me, since apparently these weren't one per customer. I jumped on the trade channel and spent around 400 white stones scooping up 50 electronic components while they were still cheap, because once people started mass building thermostats, that price would only climb. After breakfast, I started the day's hunt, and it went the way these things usually did, smooth and lucrative, netting me over 2,300 white stone. On top of that, I picked up a white militia soldier nest and a green skill stone. Spirit Eye named the stone Shield, green quality, raising my defense by 10% whenever I cast Shield. And since I'd been running around with no defensive skill at all, I learned it myself immediately. Then I went to handle the flour producer. It was sitting at level 26 kilograms of flour a day, which no longer stretched far enough. The jump to level 3 wanted 80 wood, 20 iron block, 20 copper block, and 400 white stone, so I bought what I lacked and pushed it through, doubling output to 12 kilograms, roughly 24 pounds. Between me, Windsor, Dark Moon, and 10 commoners, I had 13 mouths, so it was tight but workable, especially since fishing still topped us up, even if a steady diet of bread gets dull enough to make a man weep. I had 1,800 odd white stone left after that, so I spent 300 more on iron and copper and built the thermostat I'd drawn that morning, planting it in my own core cabin since my room had no cooling at all. A few commoners ferried ice cubes in until the air went pleasantly cool. I dropped onto the sofa, Wawa lounging across the top of my head, while Windsor and Dark Moon murmured to each other on the bed. I plucked Wawa down, tucked her into the crook of my arm, and fished out the purple crystal, and her eyes flared with delight before she clutched it and started eating. While she gnawed away, I worked through my plans. Cooling was still half solved, since I'd handled my own room but not my people's. The men shared one large room and the women a small one, so I needed at least 2 more thermostats to make their quarters livable. Somebody out there had surely pulled spare blueprints by now, so I opened trade and posted 3 buy orders, 100 white stone each, for thermostat blueprints, planning to put 2 in the living quarters and stash a third in my one empty small room for storing ice. I took stock of my real estate while I was at it. 2 large rooms, 1 for the men, 1 packed with ice, and 4 small ones. Of the small rooms, the women had 1, the kitchen claimed another, the seawater converter and flour producer filled a third, and the last set empty, earmarked for more ice. By my math, I could start selling ice cubes as soon as tomorrow. Everyone would likely have a thermostat by then, and under tomorrow's heat, a player without cooling simply wouldn't make it. The cull always started on the 4th day of the week, like clockwork. I carried Wawa back outside to keep producing ice, doing it the same way as before, conjuring cubes myself while 2 hands hauled them off, resting whenever my mana bottomed out. I'd barely settled in when a male commoner came over with a blueprint in his hands. I took it, waved him back, and read it. It was a sunshade blueprint, white quality, a parasol to fend off the summer sun, wanting 3 wood and 5 cloth. And since something like that was exactly what the deck needed, I built it at once. Opened up, the sunshade was big enough to cover 2 lounge chairs, so I stretched out under it and resumed making ice in a steady rhythm. When my mana ran dry, I switched over to the arena, because those points mattered, and I had every intention of competing hard in the coming Demon Domain event. The prize that drew me was ship cores. I tried buying them on the trade channel, but nobody was fool enough to part with 1, so I'd come up empty. I understood their weight now. Without ship cores, a ship couldn't be upgraded, and that meant ship cores alone decided how far I could expand across the sea, which made me determined to haul home as many as I could grab. The day passed without incident, and evening rolled in. Once everyone had eaten and scattered to their rooms, I tallied the afternoon's work. I built 3 more thermostats from the freshly bought blueprints and set them in the living quarters as planned, and I'd bought up a heap of cotton wool and cloth, run off a batch of bedding with the bedding set blueprint, and left Mori to outfit the beds. Back in my own room, I found Windsor and Dark Moon sitting on the sofa, and it hit me that I'd never sorted out where Dark Moon was supposed to sleep. I obviously couldn't park her in my room and wreck my privacy with Windsor, so I frowned, turning the puzzle over. Then Windsor, seeing me walk in with the cooler, beat me to it, suggesting she and Dark Moon take the bed tonight while I made do with the sofa. That stopped me for a second. Back on Blue Star, I'd known plenty of married men who got exiled to the couch, some of whom even splurged on a nice one for the occasion, and I hadn't expected to join their ranks out here. Reading my hesitation as refusal, Windsor crossed over, lifted the cooler from my hand, hooked her arm through mine, and tugged me down onto the sofa. She pointed out that Dark Moon had only just arrived and I couldn't very well stick her in with the crew, so I should just put up with it a while. She kept shaking my arm and playing the spoiled card, and I looked from her to Dark Moon, who turned her face away from me entirely, and wondered how those two had gotten so close in one day. I told them it was fine, the sofa was plenty big, and I'd take it. Honestly, I had no objection, since rooming the two girls together would only help them bond, and going without Windsor for a stretch was hardly a tragedy. I had arena points to grind anyway, and that wasn't about chasing one night's fun. Windsor thanked me with a kiss on the cheek and led Dark Moon to bed, where Windsor undressed but Dark Moon kept her clothes on, which didn't surprise me given how new we still were. I stripped down without ceremony, ignoring Dark Moon's faint blush entirely, then collected the day's money tree haul, sprawled on the sofa, and opened Wang Mok's trade list. I bought 2 more thermostat blueprints off it to push my insulation further, then laid out the rest of the day's pulls, a green commoner summon card, a white soldier nest, and another white commoner summon card. The green one went first into 100 transformations, and what came back made me laugh out loud. It was a hero transfer card, special grade, granting its target a hero profession, and the description spelled out what that meant. Infinite possibility, the chance to climb to higher tiers without quality holding you back. So that was the answer to a question that had nagged me. I'd never understood why the hero profession didn't just hand out raw combat power, and now I saw the truth. It boosted growth potential instead, which is worth far more than a flat strength bump. I tucked it away for Huahua, since she was already gold quality and this would make her a true legendary hero, assuming pets could even use it. Then I dropped the white soldier nest into 100 transformations to see if it would surprise me, and it did. The white nest leapt 2 whole tiers to blue and came out as a rock giant soldier nest, letting me recruit rock giants, which just from the name sounded a cut above militia. My last slot went to a purple stone, and this time I pulled 2 purple crystals at once, a small critical hit, both bound for Huahua tomorrow. With that done, I entered the arena and reappeared in the corridor, which was packed tonight since evening was when board players flooded in to kill time, farm competition points, and sharpen their footwork in real fights. I didn't dawdle. I bought a virtual mask and slid into an empty seat, the mask being a necessity now that enough people recognized me on sight, and without it I'd be swarmed by chatter I had no patience for. Instead of jumping into a match, I scanned the active fights for anyone high-ranked, since watching better players broadened my read on the strange talents floating around out here, so I'd never freeze if I met something similar. I grabbed a drink while I browsed, 1 white stone being pocket change to me now. A small fair hand patted my shoulder and broke my concentration, and a petite girl with a startlingly full chest dropped into the seat beside me, a golden mask over her face. I gave her a glance. She wore a miniskirt and a short-sleeved white tank top with a blue cat printed on it, cheeks puffed out in a sulk. She told me to quit hiding, that she'd already made me, and when I admitted I had no idea who she was, she introduced herself as Li Kyo and stuck out a small hand, saying it felt like fate to run into a big shot like me. Of course I knew the name. I asked how she'd recognize me when I'd hidden all my information behind that mask, and she said breezily that her eyes worked differently from other people's, her talent, and left it there. I wouldn't dream of pressing for the specifics, since prying into a player's talent is about the rudest thing you can do. I asked why her arena ranking had slipped this season, whether she'd given up the boss seat, or whether maybe Hagawa Hina was right that I simply had no real strength. My expression went cold at that, because what was that supposed to mean? And I asked whether the little girl knew how to hold a conversation at all. Calling her a little girl was a mistake. Her eyes went wide, since being treated as a child was clearly her sorest spot, and she snapped at me to open my eyes and look, that she was 25, probably older than me, even puffing out her chest for emphasis, which made her point in more ways than one. I was honestly thrown, both by her ferocity and by the age. Because the stereotype said foreign women ran tall and strong, and here was the opposite. I apologized, told her it had been a slip of the tongue, and since Li Kyo was in fact not small in the relevant sense, I didn't fight the point. Mollified, she crisply demanded I add her as a friend so we could trade good things down the line, complaining that she'd sent me requests over and over and I'd never once answered. That was true, but only because I drowned in friend requests and just wiped them all at once, so I'd never single her out, though now that she'd hunted me down in person I wasn't about to refuse. I added her, and she beamed and said she'd finally collected everyone she found interesting, then excused herself to go compete, patting my arm before vanishing from her seat into a match. I shook my head and went back to scanning, and to my surprise, I found a fight worth watching. Hagawa Hina against some opponent. My grudge with him couldn't be smoothed over, and frankly I'd never grasped why he clung to me so doggedly. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that I decided to deal with him, because if I let his needling stand, every other player would learn to do the same, and that I couldn't have. Kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. Since I meant to fight him eventually, I wasn't about to be careless, so I pulled up his match to study him, knowing yourself and your enemy being the surest road to never losing. The arena was hilly terrain dotted with low mounds, and Hagawa Hina faced a burly man across it. He wore black pants and a white long-sleeved shirt with a little braid in his hair, a dagger gripped in each hand, while the big man carried a steel saber and a full set of armor, obviously a tank warrior. When the match opened, Hagawa Hina charged straight in, and the tank, plainly wary of his reputation, refused to meet it head-on, planting himself and waiting in a ready stance. Hagawa Hina closed fast and lashed out with both daggers, one at the head, one at the gut. but the tank simply tilted away from the high strike, ignored the low one entirely, and swung his saber through where Hagawahina stood. Hagawahina hadn't expected such reckless aggression, a man trading hits without flinching, and his face shifted as he bent low and rolled aside. The tank pounced on the opening, striding in and chopping down again, before Hagawahina could find his feet, pressing the advantage hard, and Hagawahina had no choice but to keep dodging. Backpedaling step after step, anger crept into his face. Since one careless opening had handed the tank control of the whole fight, he'd wanted to keep his real strength hidden, but that was off the table now, unless he was willing to lose. And Hagawahina would rather die than lose to a nobody and become the channel's punchline. The tank, sensing the wind, bore in with the saber flashing, even releasing arcs of saber light. So he was a professional too. But this time Hagawahina stayed calm, a mocking little smile surfacing as the light came down. And then he simply wasn't there. The saber light struck bare ground and threw up dust, and when it cleared there were only a few gouged trenches where he'd been. The tank flinched and went vigilant, and a figure resolved behind him, Hagawahina stabbing for his head and his lower spine at once. The tank reacted fast, rolling forward to escape, but before he could rise, Hagawahina vanished again and reappeared in front of him. Too quick to answer, and the dagger pierced his skull and ended it. The match closed. Even in victory, Hagawahina didn't look pleased, because he'd just shown a slice of his real strength, and now every future foe would be on guard, which is exactly how it played out. Watching that fight, I felt I'd come away with something. That final trick of his was an earth element skill, something like earth evasion. The first time he'd blinked across the field, I tensed, half convinced he'd mastered space element magic, which would have made him a genuinely nasty problem, the kind of enemy you lose sleep over. But on a closer look, I'd caught the surface soil rippling each time he moved, and that told me the real story. Earth element, not space. That came as a relief, since Earth skills are badly handicapped on the open sea. It also clarified why my own ice element messenger profession rated as purple tier, because ice carries so many advantages out here, where other professions wither. My wariness toward Hagawahina ticked up, but I wasn't losing any sleep. After that I entered the arena proper, and ran my own matches, and I won every one of them, not a single loss. 4 hours later, near midnight, I logged out. Looking at the two girls asleep on the bed, Windsor especially, draped in the silk pajamas I'd sewn for her in odd moments, I felt the heat rise in me again, because those pajamas lent her a mature allure that was frankly unfair. I sighed, shut my eyes and told myself out of sight, out of mind, and that sleeping was the wiser plan. Then something soft settled against my leg, and I opened my eyes to find Windsor perched there, cheeks flushed, very much awake. She'd heard me sigh and couldn't bear it, so she crept over to keep me company, and I sat up, more than a little pleased, and pulled her into my arms. I pressed my forehead to hers and asked, softly, why she'd come, since I'd thought she was asleep. She said she'd heard me sigh and wanted to be near me, trembling a little as my breath brushed her skin. I smiled and asked whether keeping me company was all she had in mind, my hands sliding down to her waist and squeezing, and she went stiff and warned me to stop, that I'd wake Dark Moon and she'd die of mortification if she saw us. I murmured that it was fine, that I'd be gentle, and Dark Moon would never notice, and shifted just enough that Windsor couldn't pretend she didn't feel how much I wanted her. She glanced at Dark Moon lying turned away from us, then lowered her head, shy, and I understood her perfectly, so my hands kept moving, and a quiet, careful little battle began under the covers. Dark Moon lay with her back to us, face burning frozen, not daring to move a muscle, holding her pretend sleep together by sheer will. She'd felt Windsor slip out of bed earlier, and simply hadn't known how to react, so she'd chosen to know nothing and let it run its course. She hadn't taken Windsor for someone capable of this, not after the gentle, modest girl she'd talked with all day, and her mind churned as the soft, smothered sounds went on behind her. Then a sudden shrill beeping tore through the cabin, and all three of us jolted, hearts lurching, Windsor and I most of all, badly startled, and Windsor let out a small involuntary cry. I held her close but had no time to soothe her, because I knew that sound, the alarm. I scrambled up, yanked on my underwear, and bolted out of the cabin. Windsor understood at once, still shaky, so she cast a quick healing on herself to steady her spirit and her strength, then pulled on the dress Dark Moon wordlessly handed her, slipping it on without meeting her eyes. She was thoroughly mortified now, wondering how she'd ever face Dark Moon again, and laying all the blame squarely on me. To her relief, Dark Moon barely reacted and simply walked out of the cabin, and Windsor breathed easier and hurried after her. Outside, they found me already in it, Hua, Little Blue, and a cluster of bow-armed commoners trading blows with a school of fish. Windsor rushed to my side. I told her the levels were mostly low, and the only real problem was the sheer numbers, ordering her to clear out the higher-tier sea monsters while Dark Moon shielded the commoners and held casualties to 0. Spirit Eye had already swept the swarm for me. Most ran level 3 or 4, but some hit level 7 or 8. They were nearly all flying swordfish, white quality, their one trick a flying sword that wasn't a water arrow but a bolt of raw energy. To me, they posed no danger so long as I stayed sharp, but to my white quality commoners, they were lethal. Windsor and Dark Moon moved the moment I gave the word. Windsor loosed light arrows, hunting the higher-level monsters and slipping a healing onto wounded commoners between shots, while Hua rained down small fireballs and threw the occasional fire shield or firebinding to cover anyone caught out. Dark Moon prowled the deck, and whenever a monster pushed in close, her dagger went black and dropped it in a single stroke. So fast and so steady she looked less like a fighter than a dancer. Killing turned into a kind of grim, graceful performance. Little Blue stuck to its bread and butter, charging and biting. I shielded myself, then sent water arrows into the swarm, lobbing a freezing spell wherever the fish bunched up. For me, these low-quality monsters were basically free money, though no experience, since most ran below level 5, and I only earned growth off kills near my own level. Cores and dropped items piled up on the sea around the boat, blood seeping out across the water. Then Little Blue gave an uneasy whimper, and I went rigid, because I knew that cry meant it had sensed something far worse. 2 white flying swords tore up out of the sea, one chasing the other, both streaking for Windsor. She threw up a light shield, but it ate the first sword and the second was already on her, so Hua and I both slammed shields into place ahead of her in the same breath. The 2 shields shattered and bled the swords forced to nothing, and Windsor snapped up a fresh light shield. I followed the trajectory back to its source. 2 silver-white sea monsters, 5 meters long, floated on the surface, and one of them breached, showing me a flat, blade-shaped body. Furious that their ambush had failed to kill Windsor, the pair let out angry cries, and I caught myself genuinely startled that fish could make sound at all. At their call, the lesser flying swordfish hammering the boat redoubled their assault, going frenzied. I checked the 2 big ones with Spirit Eye. Flying swordfish, blue quality, level 12, stats in the mid-60s across strength, agility, and defense, and only 2 skills, flying sword and leap. I was almost insulted on their behalf, since a blue monster with 2 skills, one of them a useless hop, barely earns the name. Still, it was good news for me, because more skills would have meant a real chance of losing people. Even so, only Windsor and Hua could meaningfully touch these 2, and Hua could only stall. I made the call fast, telling Hua and me to pin one while Windsor put down the other, because there was no cleaner option. Dark Moon was level 3, and her close-range kit was nearly worthless against ranged monsters skipping across the waves, so I left her on crowd control. Walked one in firebinding, and I layered a freezing spell on top, while Windsor threw everything at her target. She opened with an entangling spell, but the fish slipped it with a leap, so as it hung in the air she landed a bewilder that sent its mid-leap flying sword wide. The instant it splashed down, she cast entangling spell again, and this time, dazed by the bewilder, it failed to dodge and was bound. Windsor seized the moment, drilling a light arrow into it that punched a bloody hole without killing, then stacking another bewilder to drag its movements slow. The fish, goaded by pain, fired a flying sword that concentrated fully on her shield and broke it again, but she didn't flinch, just raised a new light shield and kept loosing arrows at its head, though its thrashing kept her shots off the kill. The blood kept welling though, and she could see she'd bleed it out if she stayed patient. Even so, she fretted, watching me because she knew my own strength made the other monster a brutal matchup, and she was exactly right. Hua and I, 2 against 1, couldn't land real damage and could only buy time. The thing broke our control and surged toward the hull at speed, then flung a flying sword at Hua rather than me, clearly reading her as the bigger threat, and only her small size and flight let her squeak past it. That was no kind of solution. If it reached the ship, it would gut the hull whatever else happened. Little Blue lunged to body block it, but the fish just leaped clean over Little Blue's bulk, and the moment it hit water, Hua and I clamped control on it again, both of us off attacks entirely now since our damage couldn't crack its defense. It tore free fast and bore in once more. I glanced at the deck and saw commoners already bleeding, and I knew that if this dragged on, the dying would start. Gritting my teeth, I dug through my space and pulled out an item. It was a poison element bomb, special grade, which eroded a creature with toxin, its strength scaling against the target's poison resistance, and I just prayed it would melt the thing outright. I held it ready, watching the flying swordfish close, planning to fling it the instant the monster came near enough to poison. I didn't dare blink. Then Dark Moon was at my side, her clear, cold voice telling me to let it come closer, that she could handle it. I turned to her, baffled, since I couldn't imagine what a level 3 close-range fighter could do to a blue monster, but her loyalty was 100 and she'd never steer me wrong, so if she said she had a way, she had a way. I asked anyway, just to be sure, and she answered, calm, that I could rest easy. She was confident. Reading the certainty in her eyes, I stopped hesitating and put the bomb away, then cast her Shadow Lurk skill, melting into my own shadow under the moonlight. Hua and I kept throwing control to keep stalling the monster, because if I dropped my guard entirely, the thing might smell the trap and hang back. Soon it reached the boat, lashing its tail to throw up a wave, then breached and lunged straight at me, having clearly clocked my special status, and decided to take the lord out first. Its huge mouth gaped, rows of teeth bared, eyes shot through with red, and just as it closed to bite, a black light flared across its vision. Pain bloomed through its body, and then it knew nothing. I watched, stunned, as Dark Moon dropped out of the air to the deck, having surged up out of my shadow with her dagger gone black, and a blade of darkness a full meter long streaming from its edge. One slash had taken the flying swordfish's head clean off its body, dead in a single blow. I stared at her, struggling to process it, because nothing about a level 3 hero gutting a blue monster like that made sense. She didn't notice my disbelief, just walked over and held out a skill stone she'd recovered, and I took it. It was a flying sword technique stone, blue quality, granting a 30% boost when releasing a flying sword, with no exclusive class requirement, which meant Dark Moon could use it too. She was strong, but her one glaring weakness was the total absence of ranged attacks, a real liability in a duel, so I handed it straight back and told her it was hers. I'd considered running it through 100 transformations, but skill stones are precious and the talent's too unpredictable to gamble one on. So an immediate strength bump was the smarter play, since a strong enough crew never wants for loot. After a day of getting my measure, she didn't argue this time and simply used it, and a chime told me her affinity had climbed another 3. I sent her back to shielding the commoners and keeping casualties at 0. I was burning to know how she'd suddenly hit that hard, but the middle of a fight wasn't the moment, so I waded back in and started mopping up the small fry myself. I wasn't worried about Windsor, since her monster was clearly almost finished. Once she'd seen I was safe, the anxiety drained out of her and she settled into her rhythm, bewildering the fish's swords off target and feeding it light arrows that whittled its life down, and before long it ran out of blood and died. With the second big fish gone, the surrounding flying swordfish broke off and scattered into the deep, and I exhaled, because a battle that long is exhausting in the head more than the body. Then Windsor came over and held out a skill stone, telling me this one had dropped too. I almost laughed at my own luck, another stone in one night, but my hope deflated the moment I read it, because it was a leap skill stone, blue quality, 30% agility while leaping, restricted to the merman race and the archer class, useless to anyone aboard. I wondered idly if Little Blue could take it, gave it a try, and got my answer in a system line: skill stones can't be used on pets, unless the pet has gained a hero class, which then lets them learn skills on their own. So be it. I did have a hero transfer card, but that one was spoken for, reserved for Huawa, so I decided to run the leap stone through 100 transformations instead, since I'd never transformed a skill stone before and was honestly curious what purple thing might fall out. I told Windsor to go heal the wounded and make sure nobody died, and she nodded and got to work, while I set Huawa to gathering the spoils off the water, the flying swordfish kills being a serious haul. Once the healed commoners pitched in, the corpses came aboard fast and the battlefield was clean before long. I sent everyone off to rest, then called Huawa over and gave her the 2 purple crystals, and she lit up, hugging my head and rubbing her tiny face against mine until I laughed and told her to eat already. She clutched both crystals, flapped her little wings, and flew off to the fishing pier, where she roosted at night. After that, Windsor, Dark Moon, and I headed back to the core cabin, though Windsor walked oddly, keeping a careful distance from Dark Moon. During the fight, there'd been no room to feel anything, but now that it was over, remembering the moment Dark Moon had caught us, she'd gone awkward and squirmy inside. I felt none of it. In my own head, I had no intention of letting Dark Moon slip away, since a cat-eared girl was exactly the sort I meant to win over, and we'd all be living openly together soon, so what was there to be shy about? Back in the cabin, I sat on the sofa and ignored the 2 of them murmuring and blushing on the bed, checking my assets instead. Nearly 4,000 white stone now, because dangerous as the ambush had been. It had paid well. I weighed my options. Hold the stone and dump it tomorrow on ice sails to rush a wooden boat upgrade, or sink it into technology right now. I went with technology since the whole level wasn't urgent, whereas faster propulsion would carry me to my destination sooner. I opened the technology interface and found multi-or linkage power propulsion technology at level 2, the upgrade asking 2,000 white stone, and I paid without flinching. Then I bumped ship thermal energy technology to level 2 for another 1,000, so I could bank more thermal charge while the weather ran hot. I'd have pushed further, but my purse was empty, so the rest could wait for tomorrow, which dropped me back under 1,000 white stone. No matter, ice sails would refill it. I closed the panel, and my eyes drifted to Windsor and Dark Moon stretched out on the bed. The 2 of them lay face down, and I crossed from the sofa to the bed and gave Windsor a light tap, which drew a startled little cry and a flushed, complaining look over her shoulder, as she asked what I thought I was doing, embarrassed enough already in front of Dark Moon, without me making it worse. Dark Moon's cheeks colored too, her thoughts clearly drifting back to what she'd overheard, her body warming. I paid none of it any mind, just hopped onto the bed and wedged myself in between them, since my affinity with Dark Moon sat at 75 now, and a bit of closeness wouldn't put her off. And a little contact tends to deepen a bond and nudge that affinity higher anyway. I slid an arm around Windsor, my hand tracing her spine, and asked what the 2 of them had been whispering about, ignoring her embarrassment, figuring we'd best get used to this. Windsor went still, and both girls dropped their heads, since their talk had been girls' secrets they'd never share with me, so I let it go before they got genuinely upset and changed tack. I asked Dark Moon how she'd killed that flying swordfish so easily, since by rights her current strength shouldn't have managed it, and Windsor, who'd wondered the same, looked over too. Dark Moon didn't hide it, explaining it was the effect of her Moonshadow skill. When I asked, since I couldn't read my hero's skill details myself, she said it was a special one, usable only under a moonlit night, time limited, and that while it ran her strength simply doubled. That floored me, because for all its limits, doubling raw strength is monstrous, and I pictured her at level 30 casting it and felt a chill. She truly earned the Night Hunter name, terrifying in the dark, well past Windsor on a moonlit field. I pressed on, asking about darkness erosion, and she said any strike that landed dropped the target into a weakened state, so a debuff, and from watching her I'd already guessed Darkness Blade reshaped her weapon and sharpened it. I told them to rest, and Windsor promptly ordered me to the sofa, blunter than I'd braced for, which told me the night's excitement had genuinely rattled her. I sighed for effect and lamented that I was apparently still bound for the sofa. What a miserable life, and got up to go. Windsor looked faintly reluctant but held her tongue, since all of this was my doing. Then Dark Moon surprised everyone by suggesting the Lord take the bed. Catching the look on both our faces, she realized how that sounded and hurried to clarify that she meant the two of us should have the bed and she'd take the sofa. Windsor relaxed, having briefly feared Dark Moon was proposing something else, while I felt a flicker of disappointment because of course there was no such luck, though it was worth a shot. So I said Dark Moon was clearly the one who cared about me, with a pointed glance at Windsor, and announced that since Dark Moon insisted, I'd take the bed. Windsor looked a little wounded, since that made it sound like she didn't care, when she'd been the one creeping over in the dead of night. As Dark Moon moved to rise, I caught her hand and told her the bed was huge, and there was no need to exile herself. We could all rest on it together. Both girls turned identical looks on me, the kind you give a wild animal, Windsor glaring outright, so I rushed to explain that I only meant Windsor should sleep in the middle and separate us, since the bed easily fit 4 or 5. I knew sleeping under one cover was off the table, but a little proximity could only help. Reassured, Windsor stopped protesting and turned to gauge Dark Moon, then coaxed her, saying they should just do as I'd said, since the sofa couldn't compare to the bed. Dark Moon hadn't wanted to agree, content enough with the sofa, but between Windsor's coaxing and my hopeful stare something in her shifted, and she said with practiced calm that it was fine. I told everyone to settle down before we wasted any more of the night, pulled Windsor over, and rolled to the innermost edge, while Dark Moon lay beside Windsor on the outside, her heart pounding so hard I half imagined I could hear it. Shy as she was, Windsor still curled into me and buried her face against my chest, and I kissed her forehead and wished her good night. She caught me winking at her, and understood at once that I'd been needling her on purpose all along, so she pinched the soft flesh at my waist and gave an indignant little huff. The cabin went quiet, leaving only the sound of 3 heartbeats in the dark. Dawn came. It was the 4th day of the week. I opened my eyes to find I'd somehow migrated to the middle of the bed, Windsor and Dark Moon each with a leg thrown across me. A happy sort of weight to wake under. Their lashes were trembling, so I knew they were already awake and only pretending, but I let them keep the pretense. I eased free, grabbed the cooler, and headed out, because today was the day I made real money. Once I'd gone, Windsor and Dark Moon let their eyes open and traded a look, color rising in both their faces. Windsor weathered it better, having long since grown comfortable with me. Her shyness today owing mostly to its being the first time she'd shared a bed with me in front of an outsider. Dark Moon was far more reserved, since this had been her first such closeness with a man at all, beginning with a shared pillow, which left waves rolling through her quiet heart. Looking at Windsor now, she felt more than shy. She felt uneasy because Windsor was the Lord's woman, and she'd clung to me in the night, and she half expected reproach. Windsor read the tangle in her eyes easily enough, took one of Dark Moon's hands, and said with a small smile not to worry, that if Dark Moon liked the Lord, she wouldn't object in the least. That only flustered Dark Moon more, and she protested quickly that she had no such thoughts, Sister Windsor, because she cared deeply about Windsor's opinion of her, and dreaded opening a rift between them. Windsor sat up, unbothered by what the motion revealed, patted Dark Moon's head, and said she needn't fret over any jealousy, that she could see plainly the Lord was interested in her, so if Dark Moon liked him, she ought to be a little braver. Studying that earnest face, Dark Moon understood Windsor truly meant to comfort her, not test her, and she shifted to lay her head on Windsor's lap, looking up to ask whether Sister Windsor really didn't mind about the Lord. Windsor rolled her eyes at the doubt and said of course she minded. She loved the Lord dearly, and when Dark Moon, puzzled, asked then why she'd allow another woman to pursue him, Windsor answered as if it were obvious, because she could see the Lord liked Dark Moon, so naturally she had to help him. Had I heard that, I'd have been genuinely moved, since Windsor loved me so completely that whatever I wanted, she'd find a way to make it mine. The answer clearly blindsided Dark Moon, who hadn't imagined Windsor so wholly devoted to protecting me. Since fine as the Lord was, surely it shouldn't run that deep, and in her place she'd have had a few opinions about the Lord chasing other women. So she asked whether Windsor wasn't afraid that, with others around, the Lord would grow distant from her. Windsor laughed it off, saying of course not. How could I ever be distant from her? I'd simply pull Dark Moon in close, right alongside her, which showed how well she knew me. Then she patted Dark Moon's head once more, rubbing the little black cat ears, and told her again to remember, if she liked him, to be braver. Dark Moon gave a soft hum, and Windsor told her to get up. The two of them rose and came out of the core cabin to find me sprawled on a lounge chair under the sunshade, a small table beside me set with iced fruit and chilled drinks, and they walked over and sat. I turned to Windsor and told her to come fish while I went for the ice, handing her the resource fishing rod and passing Huahua from my arm into Dark Moon's. Windsor took the rod and started casting, and Dark Moon cradled Huahua, clearly taken with the dainty little thing. First, I drew out the hero transfer card from yesterday and used it on Huahua, then checked her panel. Huahua, Fire Elemental Spirit, Legendary, level 6, her stats in the low 40s, 430 mana, now reading Profession Hero, Fire Element Controller, with her old skills intact, a white small staff equipped, Loyalty 100, Affinity 100. Her information had transformed completely, and I hadn't expected the card to do so much. Her panel looked exactly like Windsor's now, nothing about it suggesting a pet at all. Beyond the hero profession, she'd gained Fire Element Controller, which I figured was the class effect that came bundled with a Fire Elemental Spirit. The last line surprised me too, since I hadn't realized her loyalty and affinity toward me both sat at full value, and it dawned on me that those two hidden stats run maxed for every summoned pet and only surfaced now that she'd become a hero. Down the line, if I landed another hero transfer card, I'd change Little Blue's class, because the hero profession's perks were numerous, and the growth potential far outstripped the non-heroes. I closed the panel, set the thinking aside, and started making ice, having the commoners cart each batch off to the storage room as it came. Time slid by, and Mori came before me, bowed, and announced breakfast was ready. I got up and called Windsor and Dark Moon, and Huahua flew out of Dark Moon's arms to land against me, where I caught her quickly. Looking into her round eyes, I had the sense that becoming a hero had left her sharper and more alert. Back in the core cabin, I sat at the table Mori had already laid, glancing over a light morning spread of porridge, steamed buns, and a quick stir-fry of cabbage with vinegar. I ate while reviewing the 3 items Windsor had hauled in that morning. The first was a pleasant shock. A mineral excavator blueprint, blue quality, granting the ability to mine ore and add brick and tile to my territory's construction, demanding 200 iron block, 100 copper block, 40 rubber, and 100 electronic components. A blue blueprint meant a purple item if I ran it through 100 transformations, so I pocketed it happily and turned to the second. The second was shaped like a compass. Spirit Eye named it a treasure detector. Green quality, able to sense treasures within a 1,000-meter radius and guide me right to them. Usable for 3 hours. Not bad at all, even capped at 3 hours, and I was quietly pleased, since a permanent version would surely have rated well above green. Those 3 hours weren't to be squandered on a whim. I'd hold the detector until exactly the right opening, and wring every drop of value out of it. Then I looked at the third item. The third reward turned out to be a small cloth bag, and when I ran my spirit eye over it, the appraisal named it a mist tree seed, a green item that could be planted around a territory to release a concealing haze. The description promised it would hide my territory's information and keep prying eyes from probing how strong or weak I actually was. That was not bad at all, because a screen of mist meant any enemy who came sniffing around would have to guess at my real strength instead of reading it like a price tag. All 3 pulls had been solid, which made me wonder, only half joking, whether I ought to retire from fishing entirely and hand the rod to Windsor for good. Her luck ran circles around mine, and a merchant who refuses to delegate a more profitable worker is just throwing money into the sea. I tucked the seed away with the rest, ate, and decided to dive before anything else, so Windsor and the crew could hunt while I worked. No sense letting either job stall the other. I triggered the dive, let the wooden boat sink, and handed the controls to my navigator so I could get back to the only labor that mattered right now, turning seawater into cold cash. When we surfaced near the shore, I did not bother sorting the catch, since night was the time for inventory and daylight was for selling. I opened the trading channel and started posting ice in steady lots. 10 cubes for 90 white stone, 100 for 900, one batch after another until the listings stacked up. Then I shouted across the world channel that I had put ice on the market, that the stock was thin and that it was first come first served. I also nudged Wang Moth to spread the word and slipped him 50 cubes for his trouble, though honestly his promotion was a courtesy more than a necessity. The moment my announcement landed, the whole world channel lit up like a struck match. Someone marveled that the great Ha Shin had actually deigned to show his face, which apparently happened about as often as a snowstorm in this heat. Another demanded to know why the #1 lord was peddling ice cubes when everybody already had a personal store, and asked whether the sun had cooked my brain. A faster hand crowed that he had snatched 50 pieces the instant the listings appeared. A slower one wailed that not a single cube was left, and got told with great sympathy that his hand speed was no good, and he should break up with his partner to practice. The real point came through under the noise, that my cubes were the same size as the store ones but priced 1 white stone cheaper each, so a man who bought 50 saved 50 white stone outright. Several said 50 cubes felt like enough to get them through this whole hot stretch, and then the channel dissolved into a chorus begging me for more. I had not expected my whole stockpile to evaporate that quickly, so I went straight back to grinding out fresh cubes, draining my mana, listing the batch, and waiting for it to refill. A message blinked up on my friends list, and the sender was Lee Keo, asking whether I still had ice, and wanting 100 pieces, no greeting, no warm-up. I told her I had nothing on hand and pointed out that a player like her hardly lacked the loose change to buy ice, so why come find me specifically? She replied that saving a little was still saving, and that when I had more, she wanted first refusal. I turned her down flat and told her to go fight for cubes in the trading channel like everyone else, then closed the window before she could argue. On her end, she was probably clenching those pink little fists and fuming, which, in a small petty way, I enjoyed picturing. There were actually 3 reasons I refused her a private batch. First, she genuinely did not need my discounted ice to survive, so withholding it cost her nothing real. Second, dumping cubes into the world channel saved as many ordinary blue star players as possible, and a few cheaper white stone might be exactly what let some of them scrape through the disaster, keeping the spirit domain side stronger overall. Third was pure publicity, since I planned to have Wang Mok broadcast that I had turned down a top 10 beauties private request in favor of the common crowd, and a reputation like that occasionally pays dividends nobody can predict. That way I delayed neither my profits nor my good deeds, which is the kind of arithmetic a merchant lives for. For the rest of the daylight, I just repeated the loop: make ice, sell ice, refill, on into the night. Somewhere in the middle, Li Chung came by, and since he had sold me good things before and was not exactly swimming in white stone, I let him have 50 cubes. When night fell and dinner was done, I used the gap while my mana recovered to tally my assets, and the figure that came back was over 17,700 white stone, which honestly shocked me. Some of that was carryover plus the day's hunting and fishing, but even after stripping those out, the ice cubes alone had cleared more than 10,000. That was upgrade money, so I went straight for the wooden boat, which wanted 2,000 wood, 4,000 iron nails, 200 copper, and a single ship core. I spent 10,000 white stone buying the materials outright and pushed the upgrade through. A wash of light swept over the whole vessel, and it grew longer and wider, but this time it also grew taller, and a new staircase opened near the fishing corridor leading down into the hull. The upgrade had stopped just bolting more onto one deck, and had started adding entire floors instead. When I checked the readout, my craft had been renamed a tower ship, level 1 again, 45 meters long and 15 wide. The first floor now held a kitchen, a large living room, a public toilet, an observation deck, the fishing corridor, the mast, and the rudder, while the second floor below carried the core cabin, 2 more large living rooms, 4 small ones, a warehouse, and another toilet. Its power still ran on multi-ore linkage propulsion, and its technologies listed ship drainage, thermal energy, automation, multi-ore linkage propulsion, and diving at a weakened level 2. With diving as its special ability, the level snapping back to 1 confirmed what I had suspected, that ships reset their stage every 6 levels exactly the way talent ranks did. I climbed up to the new observation deck first, shaped like an arrow tower and perfect for watching the distance, then descended to find my core cabin had swelled into 2 rooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen. Mori could move into the new small bedroom and become my personal chef, while a second cook handled meals for the rest of the commoners. As for where that left Dark Moon, she would keep sleeping in my room, since that arrangement had already happened once. Before I called the tour finished, I pulled up the next level's requirement to see whether a ship core would be demanded again, because that detail mattered a great deal. The next level wanted 4,000 wood, 8,000 iron nails, 400 copper blocks, and 1 ship core, and seeing that confirmed, I let out a long breath. It meant every level from here would cost a ship core, and that was the optimistic read, since nobody knew whether the third stage might demand several per level. If each upgrade past the next stage swallowed multiple cores, building any truly powerful warship would carry a brutal price tag. A navy really is an army that exists to set money on fire. With the upgrade done, my mana had nearly refilled, so I started making ice again, having decided to skip rest entirely tonight. I sent Windsor and Dark Moon off to sleep, since they could not help right now and were better off conserving energy for whatever tomorrow's hunt might throw at us. The deck lay quiet and pale, faint moonlight scattering across the water until the whole sky seemed to shimmer with silver, while Li Rook steered and the sailors Wang Wei and Wang Rim kept the ship sliding forward. This was my first night spent out on the open sea, and I stretched on a lounge chair, ate fruit, and sipped a bottle of chilled red wine, finding the whole thing had a flavor all its own. Once my mana ran dry again, I turned to sorting what the crew had fished and what Windsor's group had hunted, and since there were only 4 items, I appraised them one by one. The first was a talent orb, green, granting a random talent on use, and I was thrilled that the very first pull was already excellent. Then I hesitated, weighing whether to use it raw for a guaranteed green talent, or to gamble it through 100 transformations for something better. I did not much care about blue items, and the trade would only feel worth it if my talent spat out purple or gold. In the end, I decided a guaranteed talent beat a die roll, so I used the orb directly. The system informed me my talent slots were full and the orb could not be used, which made me curse out loud at the realization that all my careful weighing had been pointless. Once I calmed down, I noticed the prompt said currently unable, not permanently unable, which quietly told me these talent slots could be increased somehow. So I asked Qianmo directly how a lord went about gaining talent slots, mostly to test whether she would even answer. She told me that reaching the 3rd stage, general rank, granted 1 slot, and reaching the 5th stage, emperor rank, granted another, and that further slots could be earned through certain special rewards. I sat there genuinely stunned that Shanmo had bothered to answer me at all, and then I started picking the reply apart for everything it implied. The plainest meaning was that I would have to wait until at least level 13 for a 2nd slot and level 25 for a 3rd, while the special reward path was clearly hard enough that I set it aside without much hope. Another thread in her answer caught me more than the slots did, which was that each stage seemed to carry a formal title, since she had named the 3rd stage general rank and the 5th emperor rank. So I asked why my information panel did not show my current rank, and how the ranks were divided in the first place. Xianmo laid out all 5 for me: soldier rank, knight rank, general rank, king rank, and emperor rank, and added that the full information display would only update once a novice lord established a territory and became a true lord. That explained a great deal, since it meant I was effectively an intern lord right now with half my permissions locked, and only after planting a real territory would I get regularized and have the rest open to me. Interns get no rights anywhere, apparently, not even in a survival game run by a goddess. Since the talent orb was useless to me for now, I shelved it to feed through 100 transformations later and moved on to the next item. The second was an ice crystal tower blueprint. Green, a defensive structure that fired freezing rays to damage and slow enemies needing wood, stone, and 5 ice gems. The tower sounded useful, but ice gem rang far more advanced than plain wood, and I had no idea where to find it, so I filed the blueprint away to worry about after I had a territory. The third was a medical room blueprint. White, a life-related building that keeps residents healthy and strengthens their sense of belonging, requiring only wood and stone, which would round out my basic infrastructure nicely. The fourth was a fish micro-resource card, white usable in a territory's rivers and lakes to produce some fish and add a food source. That last one made me curious whether other resource cards existed, for iron ore, fruit forests, gems, and the like, and the possibility had me looking forward to the future. Overall, it was a decent haul, white and green, but every item patched some gap I would feel keenly in the early days of a settlement, so I stored them and went back to ice while my mana refilled. About then, Huahua flew over from the fishing deck and landed in my arms, butting her head against my chest over and over, and I smiled and rubbed her hair. Every time she came to me, she carried this odd, settling calm, as if my heart slowed just from holding her. And traveling with such a cheerful companion made me feel genuinely lucky. The thing was, she had enormous growth potential and would one day be a real pillar of my territory, which was exactly what made her growth such a stubborn problem. She could not level by killing sea monsters and could only grow by eating spirit crystals, purple crystals, and similar materials, which throttled her advancement badly. Sometime soon I would have to learn precisely what an elemental spirit like her could consume, then buy it in bulk and spend heavily to cultivate her. I was still chewing on that when a friend request pinged in the dead middle of the night, and I wondered who on earth wanted me at this hour. When I opened the channel, the sender was Lee Kyo, which left me a little baffled about what she could possibly want now. I clicked the box open and she went straight in, asking whether I was still planning to join the 2-domain competition and prodding at whether I was secretly short on strength. I rolled my eyes at how nosy she was and told her of course I was participating, then asked why she cared. She shot back that she had checked the rankings and my name was not even in the top 10,000, so how exactly did I intend to qualify? On her end, she was apparently sprawled on her bed under a velvet quilt, a white dolphin doll propped beside her with a lollipop. She was thoroughly annoyed since she had wanted to team up once the demon domain opened and had scanned the list 3 or 4 times without finding me. She refused to believe I genuinely could not crack the top 10,000, and decided, correctly, that I was just too lazy to grind matches. I found the whole interrogation a bit exasperating since I had barely interacted with this person. Yet here she was tracking my every placement, and something about her familiarity struck an oddly recognizable note. She was right that my ranking had not entered the top 10,000, but I had not cared, because I could grind my way in tonight and tomorrow, and I was not chasing first place, only a ticket into the competition. Spending that grinding time on more ice cubes simply made more money, and money was the whole game. So I told her not to worry, that I would absolutely qualify, then asked whether she had fallen for me, since she was paying me so much attention. She snorted that I was unbelievably narcissistic, and admitted she wanted to team up and rampage across the field together, roughly the plan I had already guessed she was building toward. But positions were assigned at random, so I asked how she imagined we could possibly end up together. Lee Kyo chuckled, rolled onto her stomach, kicked her pale little legs in the air, and announced that she had a way, then sent me a picture. The image was an appraisal of a binding rope, blue, which after use bound 2 people so that when either was teleported, both arrived at the same spot. I had never seen such a thing, so I asked how it worked. She had clearly read my reply as agreement, since she explained the rope came as a pair, one for each of us, and said she had already listed the second in the trade channel for me to buy. I opened the channel, found the listing, and spent a single white stone on it, ending up with a thin red cord about the size of a bracelet. She told me to wear it on my hand when teleporting, and I confirmed the plan, agreeing we would meet up when the time came. I was willing to partner with her for 2 solid reasons. First, a top 10 player was unlikely to be weak. Second, the partnership would deepen our mutual trust and make us comfortable trading once we both had territories, since no settlement thrives by sealing itself off from the world. She replied that she would see me then, and told me sharply not to break our agreement, and then, with a sly little smile, she snapped a photo of herself and sent it over with a note that I could use it for entertainment on a lonely night. No thanks necessary. In the picture, she lay on the bed, chest pressed flat against the mattress, to show a patch of snow-white skin. Her two legs kicked up behind her, eyes blinking, little tongue stuck out. I gave a wry smile, and the meaning loaded into her last line darkened my expression further. Because honestly, did I need that? What a joke, when there were two beauties in my room already. I closed the chat box, made another round of ice, and once my mana emptied, I stepped into the arena to play some matches since I still needed to grind my way into qualifying. The arena was loud and packed as always, so I wasted no time, put on my mask, took a seat, and started straight in. The map this round was an ice field, which for me was a battlefield tilted heavily in my favor. And when I checked my opponent, I found a middle-aged man, dark-skinned, burly, a full 2 meters tall, gripping a wolf fang club, and wearing a suit of armor. His information named him Jesseny, level 6, which surprised me since a level 6 player was not nothing and I had never heard of him. Then I worked it out, that a man with poor talent, or none, would naturally have pushed his level higher to compensate, because in the early game level is the only thing that lets weak talent suppress strong talent. Some players deliberately held their level down to wait for talent-boosting treasures, which used to be my own thinking. But once I learned rare spirit treasures could raise attributes, I stopped suppressing mine. Most people raced their levels up regardless, since the higher the level, the safer the sea. And the only reason I dared coast was that I had a legendary hero like Windsor at my side. Otherwise, I would have been leveling like a madman too. Jesseny read my displayed level 5 but did not relax, because enough matches had taught him that level does not equal strength and that underestimating an opponent costs dearly. He hefted the club and charged, his talent being immense strength at green quality, and having drawn the berserker profession, he carried some real confidence into the fight. I watched him come, raised my staff, and dropped a freezing spell that locked his feet to the ice, and he strained and could not break loose, which alarmed him badly. A lower level opponent pinning him meant my talent had to be excellent, and the thought flashed through his head that I was very likely the number 1 lord, since everyone knew by now that the top player wielded ice. He refused to quit and triggered his skill, Frenzy, which doubled his strength and stacked on his immense strength talent, tore him free of my freezing spell. I was honestly surprised he broke loose, but I did not panic. As he charged again, I simply refroze him, slowing him a second time, since all his power came strictly from talent and skill, which swelled his strength stat but left his agility untouched, so he was still far too slow to dodge anything I threw. Once I had him pinned, I followed with water arrow technique, since my ice element messenger profession ran downward compatible with water skills, which was exactly why the system rated my class purple instead of the blue a pure water messenger would have drawn. The arrow struck only his helmet and did no fatal damage, and seeing him about to wrench free, I locked him down with another freezing spell. Jesseny roared that if I had any guts, I would fight him head-on instead of disgracing my status as number 1, and I ignored the bait and fired another water arrow. I was not stupid enough to walk into danger over a cheap provocation and a scrap of vanity, because when a problem can be solved the simple way, manufacturing trouble for myself is the act of a fool. Seeing me stonewall him completely, Jesseny gave up arguing and just swatted the incoming arrows aside, knowing in his gut that he would lose if this continued, but unable to find any way to break the pattern, so he raged uselessly and grew more miserable by the second. I kept cycling control and attack, until he was severely wounded and clearly fading, and right then he let out a furious roar that if he was going to die, he would make sure I did not walk away clean either. He swung the Wolfang club and hurled it at me with everything he had, and the sight startled me, because it seemed I had genuinely pushed him over the edge. I threw up a shield for myself just in time, and the club smashed into it, its force gutted but not erased, so it still cracked into my chest and drove me back 3 steps and forced a mouthful of blood out of me. I did not stop to check the damage, and fired water arrow technique straight at him, and he laughed wildly, ignoring the arrows because he had nothing left, satisfied that he had at least landed a blow at the end. This time the arrow took him in the head, his laughter cut off, and he fell dead. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth, and walked out of the combat zone, then sat down to think through what that match had cost and taught me. First, I could not keep underestimating players with mediocre talent, because mediocre did not mean harmless, and a single careless second could hand a man like that the win. Second, I had not been cautious enough, since against someone as vicious as Jesseny, without the shield skill I would have been the corpse instead of him. So I warned myself, hard, to stay sharper and never drop my guard in the final moments, to personally confirm a kill before relaxing, because that bruise was a lesson and a piece of expensive experience both. Then I went back into the arena, and across the next several fights I played far more carefully and won cleanly. When I came out, my mana had refilled, so I made a batch of ice, listed it, and turned to today's 100 transformations before midnight expired the day's 3 uses. The first thing I pulled was a leap skill stone, blue, which granted the leap skill and raised agility by 30% on use. Since I had never fed a skill stone through 100 transformations before, I was eager to see whether I could draw a purple item, or with luck, even a gold one. I triggered the transformation, and what bloomed in front of me was a profession temple construction blueprint. Purple, described as an indispensable building for a strong territory that let residents change professions, become professionals, and let professionals learn hidden skills. The materials it demanded were staggering: 1,000 ancient wood, 1,000 refined iron, 500 adamantine, 100 cloud-patterned stone, and 100 each of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth element gem. The description left me slack-jawed, because a profession temple was functionally an endless supply of skill stones and profession cards rolled into one, which meant I had absolutely hit the jackpot. The catch was that I had not laid eyes on a single one of those materials yet, and had no idea when I would ever finish it, so it went to the bottom of the box to gather dust. Though even unbuilt, it added real foundation to my future territory. For the second pull, I rubbed my chin a while, then took out an ore extractor blueprint, blue, which granted the ability to mine ore and required iron blocks, copper blocks, rubber, and electronic components. A mining blueprint was not especially precious to me right now, and I figured I could easily pick up another after founding my territory. Feeding it through 100 transformations for at least a purple was the smarter play, especially since I had just watched a blue skill stone bloom into a purple profession temple and felt the gap between the two tiers more sharply than ever. Without further hesitation, I triggered the talent. Light flashed, and an object appeared, cylindrical, about half my height, silver white all over and traced with patterns in many colors. I stepped up and studied it, finding a smaller cylinder hollowed out of the top with spiraling colored grooves along its inner wall, and beside that hollow sat a red button marked with the word START. A blueprint had turned into something this elaborate and frankly advanced looking, so I ran my spirit eye over it, read the description, and burst out laughing, because this was like being handed a pillow the very moment exhaustion hits, the heavens themselves lending a hand. The appraisal called it an element converter. Purple, which took items containing elements and converted them into the matching element gems and special purple crystals, with a note warning that producing purple crystals burned a great deal of energy. I read it twice to be sure I had not misjudged. Then I scooped Huahua into my arms, pressed my forehead against hers, and told the little one, smiling, that her food problem was solved from this day forward, and she was truly blessed.